Hey everybody, this is Carlos Ocelot, founder and CEO of G2 Esports, former professional gamer, and wonderful bodybuilder, as you may have known. Of course, you know me for that, pretty sure. And you're watching Dankan's channel. Thorin, my man. Enjoy.
Right, this is going to be episode 53 of Narrative Wake, a show that for some reason just been resurrected. It's come back to life, hasn't it? Which also provides yet another sort of connection to the title. Not just something I just came up on the spot there. Not really clever, whatever. Anyway, like I said, no. What's great about that one is, do you remember at the beginning, right? I did do this part purposely. Do you remember when we launched the show, Kelsey, and I tried to make it like some sort of like interesting secret? It's like, what does the title mean or whatever? What's sad about that is the reason why I actually did that is because I knew if I just straight up explained like, well, a lot of you guys have like shit narratives and this is going to be kind of like a funeral for them where we explain why they're bad. What's great is when I even explained that, a lot of people were still just like, come again? What does he mean though? It's like narratives. Because what I've noticed, this is like one of my laws I should fucking put on the internet. Only other people have narratives and opinions, Kelsey. Everyone else, as certain other co-hosts of mine have made clear, they all have facts. They all just have, they know the reality in an objective sense, even though we're talking about stuff like, is this person who doesn't play the same team as another person better or not? So, speaking of which, this episode will indeed be about comparing players who play the same role on other teams and seeing who's better and how they play. So we'll see if we can do a better job than the average Reddit/Twitter/person. Speaking of which, Twitter analysis, we've got here Malaclypse, who, like all the best, started as a Twitter analyst, probably is a Twitter analyst still on some level. I always think you should have reclaimed that narrative years ago. I would have made if I'd been someone trying to make my way in the industry like that, I'd have like reclaimed it, like, yeah, and we're the best on Twitter or some shit, like gone with some angle like that. Like, where's your analysis then? Like,
I did actually. I was just like, yeah, fuck yeah, I am a Twitter analyst.
There we go.
About it.
Exactly.
Like, I don't take it offensive at all.
Because I always thought that was funny. It's like I never understood. Like I get why players say that. It's quite a good angle to like diss someone. Like, oh, you're just saying your opinions on Twitter. I never understood why Redditors and fans say like, he's just a Twitter analyst. It's like, so what you're saying is it's someone who watches all the games and then gives their opinion and tries to have like a comprehensive theory. Yeah, that guy would be below you. You win, guys. Anyway, what's the next segment? Oh, it's Kobe on. Yay! It's like fucking hell. Because I have another thing that tilts the fuck out of me, which is, just because we all watched the game doesn't mean we all know the same things from the game we watched. It would be like thinking we could all go to a movie and go, right, where's the stupidest person here? Come on then, mate, explain the movie to us. What was happening in that? Like, you'd never think that. But bizarrely, in video games, they do actually treat it like if 10 people watch the game, they should all have the same conclusions, which I never understood. Because to me, it's like I said in my article about analysis, half of analysis is like, for me, it is dormant in the game, but you have to have the right skill set or personality type to draw that out. It's like, the analysis hopefully should be the overlap between you and the game. Now, you notice there are some people who probably, it is just their thoughts, and there are some people who just say what happened in the fucking game. So that's also one of my favourite things as well, when people just try to have extended arguments about specific game sequences in a game. By the way, Kelsey, I got so much shit from that episode of Listen Loco because I wouldn't let you and him like debate like a very specific point in a VOD no one would remember. Because my point I made was, unless everyone has the VOD up, this is just going to go nowhere, isn't it? Like, no one's going to go back and check. I actually had a joke when we had LS and Veteran. I can't remember if it was the one we did on the Elite United where we had all three.
Yeah, it was.
I had that joke where it's like, if you guys want to have an argument like this, you basically need to have a triple stage setup that all faces each other, where you all have a projector with VODs queued up that you're like, well, my counterpoint would be this moment, 8 minutes in the G2 versus, it'd have to be some sort of a triple lecture / debate to have any chance to make those points. So we'll see how much we can draw out of the general aspects and tendencies here. So Malaclypse, right, you were telling me before the show, but the list's too long, mate. Can you just give us like the big names of teams you've worked with, either as like analyst or coach or positional coach?
Shortly Origin.
Give us like a rough time frame if you can, like season or something if you can.
Season 5, Worlds, Origin.
Okay, good Origin.
2016 and TCL. 2018. End of 2017. United. Team Liquid 2018 spring, and Splyce for spring and summer of this year so far.
Right, well, if people have just heard that list, then you will now maybe understand how Kelsey decided that this is the person we should use for this particular topic. Because what we're going to talk about is like the evolution of the top lane role, different players specifically, because obviously that's the good way you can give an example, in my opinion. You give like player tendencies or how they fit into the system in their team. And the reason why, obviously, that would be relevant to you is not only have you literally done positional work, but if you think of some of the names that he just referenced, talking to the audience here, United was the one with Licorice on. Splyce obviously has Visichaci on. If you go back, Origin was Soaz. Like, these are some pretty iconic in their own context top laners, and even of those time periods. So a lot we can get into here. So let's start out here, right? Was with all these teams, how many of them were you like specifically coaching or working with the top laners?
Visichaci, United, Team Liquid, and Splyce.
Okay, so quite a few of them. Right, where would you start out then? Because one of the things I thought we should probably paint the basic picture of is like where the top lane went over the years. Now, again, we don't have to go, it doesn't have to be like a 2-hour podcast on that, but if people think, I mean, someone like Soaz obviously was back in the day when, well, funny enough, the game was more like now. It was like solo laners were all just fucking kill lanes. Everyone was like a super duper laner, could swap over everywhere. But then there was a time period in the middle where obviously got incredibly rigid. They had a very small champion pool. They had one set job. At one point in time, so one of the things I always used to say was unfair about how we compared them. There was even a time period in history where you could argue that role explicitly was not supposed to carry. And in fact, if you wanted to be the best team, you should not have anyone who's vaguely a carry player. It was even almost like dangerous to have people who wanted to push that side of the meta, whereas that's one of the reasons why people everyone who the plebs think I hate is just someone who basically was like a janitor top laner who just got to have a world championship or whatever. And everyone's like, he's fucking amazing. I was like, is he though? Is he though? Isn't the CEO of the company the one that should get the credit? I'm just saying. I mean, listen, nice clean office, that's essential, you know, clean, you know, whatever, fucking clean up your room and all that shit. So let's start here, Malaclypse. How you've said you've watched the game for a long time. You've been like a lifelong fan of League. How do you see the evolution of the top lane? We'll just what we'll do is, depending on how, we'll have to figure out how we all talk, etc. But if we can, we'll like take some of these points, isolate them, and then expand out. So where would you start us? Where do you think what was the top lane when you first started watching the game?
Well, I'll really start with, I guess, season 2, which is after season 1. Season 1 was like settling the dust of the game, people figuring it out. Mm-hmm. People finally started having, you know, the 80 carry and support and bot lane. You had a mid laner, you had a top laner, you had a jungler. Mid laner was a mage. The jungler at the time was basically whatever fucking champ that could actually do the jungle, because jungle was not very well designed. 80 carry was down there because they scale off of items, not levels. Supports were strong in the early game, but then became fucking useless little ward bots. And then top lane was whatever. But that's the basic honest truth until about season 3, when you had a number of champions that finally kind of settled the meta of what top lane was, and then season 4 happened.
Like high mobility or tanks basically was kind of what top lane started to become because of the long lane. So just you had to be able to survive a long lane.
Pretty much. As solo.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about like with the one thing I'm always interested in is like how much of the meta, like in this scenario, as you said, in the early days of the game, because people were literally just learning the game and some of the basic strategical concepts didn't exist. Like there was very little macro, for example. In that kind of a world, most of the changes are just going to come from what's strong in the game, what's strong 1v1, what's strong in solo queue.
Yes.
Like at what point when we get to the world, as you alluded to, like, for example, the season after that was when the teleport aspect came along, the defensive masteries were super buffed, hence we had all those nightmare games with, like, Dr. Mundo versus fucking, I don't know, Trundle or whatever, like, shit like that, like, no one ever wants to see again. But in that time period, I always wondered then, was some of that, like, a paradigm that evolved? Like, could people, in theory, in top lane always have played all styles and stuff? Or do you think the game actually specifically, like, at times kind of narrowed it down, like it was a filter that only certain players could get through?
If you're talking about, like, season 4 in that,
we can go on any period for this. But
okay, so season 3, there is actually a bit of a meme that exists, which was called the Renekton bar, which was you had to be able to deal with Renekton. If you couldn't, get the fuck out of the lane. If you could, welcome to top lane. You're able to play the game, because Renekton in season 3 was really the one of the top laners that really shaped the meta. Because this is just a champion that he has Ignite. He's very strong, level 2 and 3. He's gonna all in you, And what do you do when you're 100 HP left? You're going to be under your turret. He can dive you very easily, and you're fucked afterwards because you don't have teleport. You're going to lose 2 or 3 waves. You're going to be behind a level or 2. This is also before XP rubber banding came back and all this sort of stuff to allow comeback mechanics. So you were fucked, basically. And
that was also the great thing about Renekton, though, mate. It's like that way you don't ever have to learn late game macro. Just win by like 20 minutes. In the mid game, you already won the game, so no need to group. You've already won.
Exactly.
Also, this was like when you had a bunch of top laners who are still kind of known today just sort of make their name for specifically Renekton.
Yes.
Like you had Duke, who was actually known as Leopard back then, right? He used to be Renekton one trick. Actually, a really underrated aspect of OMG success was basically like fucking OMG and Royal Club actually like had the best Renekton players in China.
Oh, okay.
So this is basically how they fucking evolved.
Obviously, Marin.
I can name another that people don't typically remember this, but Visichaci, when he first came about, he was a Renekton player. He was Renekton, Rumble, Kennen.
Yeah, I actually think, like in 2017 or 26, I think it was 2017 when Unicorns of Love like made it all the way to semifinals or whatever. It was basically because
2016, I think.
He made it to finals in 2017.
So 2016 summer, he made the finals.
It was 2017. It was semifinal, I think, because this was like the Misfits year, right? As well. When Dive and Unicorns rose up, like at Visichachi's Renekton was a really, really big thing, and he got like MVP off of his Renekton, basically. So yeah.
Okay. Well, one area we've moved into here, then, as you say, is like this is an example again, Malaclypse, of where. It's one of the reasons why, in League, I have a hard time with it because I'm not as much of an expert about the actual like details of the game, and so it's hard to draw principles from that. But in one of the things I've done in CSGO and Counter-Strike my whole career, and you can tell when you've been successful at this, mate, because eventually, if you do a good enough job, everyone else's brain just immediately accepts the paradigm, and it becomes like the water they swim in. And then when they later criticize you, they criticize you using like points that you created, basically. So one of the things I find interesting personally is how a player, as you alluded to there, basically them being really amazing at something and good makes people think that the game has to be played that way. Like, you know, like they almost don't understand that like players have different skill sets and like, you know, like an RPG character, they act as though the game just you're supposed to just do that. Whereas, as you're alluding to, especially season 2, season 3 going on, as Kelsey said, you think of some of the players then, some of them literally like have been battling their own narrative that only came out of their style of play for the last half a decade. Like I always say to Soaz, like you do know, mate, the main reason why you want to be a carry top laner is because you were just one of the best players on your team at the time when carries were played in the top lane. Like that's actually logically the other way around, mate. It's not actually that like the game was supposed to be played that way and should go back to that. It's that you were just the best when that was happening. So you've put the cart before the horse on that. So when this kind of time period emerged. Obviously, the reason it's very weird is because, like I said, the meta after went hard the opposite way, and we got this era when it was tanks and low econ, and basically, because of teleport, your job was just be vaguely capable of tanking in a team fight and come and join them when they tell you, or come to the top lane, the bottom lane the second I say, which is why, even though I say it disparagingly, jokes aside, Lupa was the best at pressing that fucking teleport key when Matt told him to press it to come in the bot lane. And that was pretty essential for their team in some regard. So what do you think about this aspect, the way the lane was thought of?
In season 4 and with TP and how...
Just as a general... I mean, we'll see where we go with it.
I mean, in general, I think top lane is a role that... Here's the thing, right? In all of League of Legends history until very recently, you had Dragon down on the bottom side of the lane and nothing in top side of the lane.
There was no Rift Herald, obviously, for until the last few years, yes.
You have 2 people on the bottom side of the map, you have 1 person on the top side of the map. You have the person that provides you all of your vision, and you have the main carry champion on the bottom side of the map, and you have whatever the fuck you have in the top side of the map. So there comes a point where people are going to recognize that no matter what the meta is, bot lane tends to become more important than top lane. Because
Yeah, I'm always amazed by the people who to this day post on Reddit that they don't understand why one of the sides has an advantage in bot lane. It's like, mate, this one isn't even complicated. Like, look at the fucking architecture of the map. One side has that shit brush that you have to do the Scar award over. The other one has a triple brush that leads into their jungle lane. Which do you think is going to be more easier to gank in a world, by the way, where we have Rek'Sai, Kayn, like fucking use your heads, guys.
not to mention like top lane tends to just be very volatile in the meta. It tends to be very volatile with jungle ganks. It's a volatile role, so it's very hard to play through it. You can play through it when the meta fits, and if your team can function even off meta, you can do it, but you're flipping coins doing so. Some people are good at flipping coins, some aren't.
Another part of it was that lane swaps also started to kind of evolve at this time.
Sure.
Yeah,
and so
I forgot about that.
Like for top lane, you don't want something that's super high resource because you're probably going to get like sort of dicked on econ earlier on. So
I mean,
hence why everyone played Maokai and just got half the CS for the first 20 minutes.
Yeah. And it can really get exacerbated, right? Depending on how good you are at the lane swaps, like if you bounce the wave correctly, etc.
Yes.
So
sure.
basically, you can actually get massive advantages off of that. So like that's when freezing became like more and more meta as well too. So
and this also comes down to you can be a carry player and be given the resources and carry the game, but when you're playing these tanks or you're playing in a meta where you're gonna take the dick, being able to take the dick graciously and doing so while maximizing the resources that you can gain by yourself and minimizing the resources the team needs to give you to stay in the game is a skill of itself. And it gets disregarded and underrated because it's not flashy and it's not fun to do and it's not fun to watch. But I've always felt that when the meta game suits a role to be stronger and more popular and a team puts all the resources to this role, that role is not that hard to play.
Sure. Well, I would put it this way, Malaclypse. Like, one of the things I've always personally thought, because obviously a lot of my favourite players were top lane players throughout history, one of the things I always thought was mad underrated is any fan can see that if Khan gets all the resources in some of the teams he was on, he can carry the game and look fucking amazing. Anyone can see that, like, I'm going to use the meme version. Obviously, there's more to this, but obviously Impact, when he was in C9, if you just don't give him any resources, he'll do a great job minimising, like you're saying. What they never did, for some bizarre reason, is realise that the real metric that showed you who the truly OP top laners were the people that were carry top laners, but they could also play without any attention and resources and still like potentially carry. So for example, you think of many different players, like actually the Shy even does it now in IG often, you know, like you actually, this is something I want to get to, you can sometimes use that as your strength. The fact that in theory this guy would be the guy who'd carry the game, but some games you're going to have to let him just fend for himself, and the degree to which he either goes even or doesn't lose that much is going to be a big deal, because presumably this must tie in, right, to, again, map architecture. The lane that is the easiest to gank in theory in most early game states is top lane, and some of the junglers have very easy access to that as well.
I think also something that is becoming more common to talk about, but it was like always less common, is just if you have your jungle, if your jungle is going to be pathing towards your side of the map anyway, and the game is going to be playing towards your side, it's really easy to fix your wave if you fuck it up, right? Like if you're bad at wave management, your jungler is going to be down there, so they're going to force a gank, and then you're going to get the bounce off and reset, and then you can play with the wave after that. But if you're on like survive side, your wave manipulation actually has to be way better, because you can't be pushing when your jungler is like going to be on the other side, their jungler is coming towards top side. Otherwise, you basically lose like all of those creeps. They freeze on you, and you're really fucked. So you have to be like pretty intelligent about how you're doing that. And I think that actually like requires more skill a lot of the time than like the acceleration side. So
the hands, the wave management's the most important thing about top lane by far. I mean, it's important for every lane, but top lane, if you cannot manage wave properly, you are fucking doomed, and you will not. Even in solo queue these days, because it's dragged on from professional play to solo queue. People understand wave management more. If you can't manage wave, you're gonna get fucked so hard, and they're gonna freeze the wave on you, and you're doomed.
Well, as you alluded to there, obviously this was the lane that became the most famous for freezes initially, and then people understood concepts like drawing the minion aggro early to if you have a certain champion matchup, having to push immediately if you have another champion matchup, otherwise you're going to spend the whole game slightly towards his tower and then get ganked 24/7. So what about this aspect? Is there more to say about that?
I mean, you have the obvious star of that and the most noticeable part of that, to the extent that people, when they talk about freezing, they think this, like the super deep freeze, which is Flame and what he was doing in season 2 and season 3, and I think part of season 4.
Yes,
particularly
maybe early.
Season 3.
Yeah.
The guy that really started wave management. I mean, when you start doing it,
just whenever you get a chance. Yeah.
Fucking. But the person that really actually deserves a lot of credit towards that was Hotshot GG. He was like one of the first people actually. He not only was one of the first people thinking about it and doing it, but he was the one teaching people about it.
Basically, if people don't know, the reason why there's that urban legend of like, what did Hotshot and Wicked have as the season 3 secrets.gg? It's just that they understood this aspect, basically. Like, they understood it's not just about being the best in this matchup or the best top laner. It's that if you can manage this side of the game, you're also just going to look way better. Which is one of the reasons, by the way, it makes perfect sense how Hotshot's career went, because he went from being really good to like progressively like really bad. It used to look like, but he's even playing the same champion. What is this like? And every speculation was all out of the game stuff, but actually this is a pretty good reason. If you had that in your back pocket the whole time and most people you were playing didn't know that, you're just going to create like favorable opportunities for yourself over and over. It would be like playing chess and not understanding positional play. You'll keep thinking, but I'm better than this guy. Like, how's he beating me? Well, because he's going to give himself way more chances to win.
Like, even going back to season 1 and 2, there's 3 players I would put as like the trifecta or the trinity of skill sets for top lane. You have wave management, which comes from Hotshot GG. You have lane matchup knowledge, which I would actually give to Wicked, because I've my basis of how I've begun breaking down lane matchups came from Wicked. I forget. I
can tell you, by the way, he's someone where, first of all, he actually does a decent job now when he still does it in his streams. I know he's not super deep in the game, but that's actually one of his strengths. I always tell people, just because he sounds like he's a bit of a simpleton, in that area he's a specialist. And secondly, that's another example of where it's so easy for a narrative to overwhelm the player, because obviously everyone used to just go, he is only good if he gets Aurelia. It's like, you are aware he's picking Aurelia into anything that's available because it's the matchup he knows the best. He's basically like the proto PoE in that sense,
Yes. And the third player I will give is pressure, like understanding pressure on the map, and that goes to Macnoon, because this is a guy that would fucking proxy waves, proxy into the enemy base and just fucking dance around. It's like, come deal with me. And
also, another Renekton player.
I think
Renekton player.
Yeah, so like kind of the Chinese equivalent of Hotshot GG is probably Xiaomei, because WE like understood wave management before a lot of teams, and so like Xiaomei was even rated pretty highly, even though he wasn't like PDD, who is actually better at a lot of these fairy champions, because he could understand the wave. So he could play like, it's becoming popular now, but he could play like the Rengar top and fucking freeze the wave like this and shit like this. So yeah.
And at this point in time, by the way, I alluding to what I said earlier, it's almost certainly the players themselves who are doing this, right? Like, no one, I mean, first of all, some of these teams, obviously coaching didn't even exist, but like conceptually, a lot of this stuff wasn't even discussed, as I said, in the community. Like, that's why the joke is, the urban legend is that no one ever found out what Hotshot's secret was. It's like, they did, it's just everyone does it now. Like, well, in theory, everyone does, Kelsey. I'm aware that that's another thing. People really think that like coaching is some out of a movie, like speeches. Like Kelsey isn't given the fucking Any Given Sunday speech like before every game. Also, it's not going like, I think you should play this champion. It's pretty OP, Like half of it is just saying like, you fucked up the wave there. This is how you should have fixed it. You should have waited for the jungler here. Like, it's stuff that actually is incredibly mundane and boring. But unfortunately, you have to sort of drill people until they just get it down.
I mean, I'm personally a theory crafter, and I have introduced some picks into meta or counter picks, but what you say is completely correct. The way I would usually put it to people is, when it comes to positional coaching, it's understanding how to utilize the information the player has and the knowledge the player has, and doing your best job to help them recollect and utilize their knowledge as much as possible. So there comes a point where players know things, but when you're playing the game versus watching the game, it's completely fun.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it is. It's like my favorite response is, I know. It's like, you know, but you don't know, you know?
Sure.
Like if you,
Look, the analogy I always give is this one, Kelsey. Yeah. We can all laugh at everyone who does it in a game, but anyone who's ever played Thresh and Lee Sin knows in their brain, I shouldn't press Q again. But you just do it anyway, don't you? You just go, something about it just goes, fucking do it. And you just do it. And it's only like once you're a third of the way into that movement that you realise, like, this is a mistake. Why have I done this?
Your body told you yes, but your mind was telling you no.
It's like you have to like physically punish your brain so much so that it becomes automatic and you don't have to think about it anymore. Because in a high pressure situation, you're not going to think about it.
Exactly.
So it just like it's really annoying to be told the same thing over and over again, but eventually it becomes automatic. So
you got to crack the whip on them. That's as simple as that. It's over and over and over and over again until they fucking have it.
I'll give you the analogy. There's a guy who I was actually quite a fan of his books. He's a kind of like some people know some of his books, but he's kind of like an underground writer. He's a guy called Colin Wilson in the UK, and he wrote just basically wrote like 100 books. And the whole thing was, any topic he would write a book about, he would just research that topic for years. So it meant that, like, because he didn't have to be a successful author, like he could just get by because he did so many books. He could literally just research, like, you know, Egyptology for 10 years and then just write like a novel that involved that aspect. So one of the things he came up with was he was very into epistemology and concepts like phenomenology. So things like, what can you know? Like, how do we think about certain things and model them? And one of the models he had for the human mind, basically, was like, instead of using like terms which people, this is a good analogy to what I said earlier about modeling in CSGO, where people just take my terms and argue against them using my own terms and think that I'm the idiot who doesn't know the game. So everyone, if I say the terms conscious and subconscious, they're going to go like, well, yeah, of course. And then the same person will turn around and go, that Freud was just a bloody fraud, wasn't he? He didn't know anything about the game. It's like, you're using his fucking concepts. Like, you're literally taking the part that you did like and saying, well, that's just obviously right. And then the part I didn't like, you just focus on that. So the point here is, instead of using that model, which people might know, his model was, he called the subconscious the robot. And his concept was, when you train the robot enough, the robot can do it automatically, or so it will seem to your conscious mind. So as in, you train it to, an obvious example would be like play the piano or something like that. Eventually, you're not literally thinking about the individual notes because you've drilled yourself to be able to do that, hopefully, and you let it take over. I mean, his joke was, the only problem is it eventually takes over everything if you keep doing it the same way. So his joke was, you know, it was good when the robot was driving the car and helping him get his work done, but then eventually it was making love to his wife and everything, you know, like, it's a pretty like witty way to do it. So, but the point is, this is kind of like, that's another thing I tell people all the time. That's another part of coaching. You're just trying to get that part so that the guy in the game, he doesn't even have to think, is this the right move? That is the move he would immediately think is right because he's been drilled on so much, which must be essential to top lane. Because again, I'm bringing it back with wave management aspects, with which side of the map that you are relative to the resources of your team. It is essential not to know just the matchup or to be a skilled player or all this other stuff that actually can at times be secondary or tertiary. Things like knowing basically the decision-making of what you're supposed to do in this spot is probably the key, right?
Yes, and it comes to the point where you're not playing the wave that's in front of you in your lane right now. You're playing the wave that's spawning in your base and coming to the lane, because if you don't position the wave correctly and you don't create the bounce, you don't crash to the enemy turret, you don't do the things that you need to do, you can just completely fuck yourself. So it comes to the point where you need to have really, really good knowledge of where the wave is, where the next wave is, and how is the wave state going to be? Is it slow pushing towards you? Are you pushing into the enemy? Because time and time again, I can find Challenger Pro players that misplay the wave because they don't recognize certain states of the wave that they can potentially play properly instead. And
the funny thing is, like, wouldn't that also be an example of where the game itself and what you are rewarded for in the game can skew your mindset? Because, for example, one thing I'm very interested in, as we like can do it now or later, move the chat to like later on metas, is like, if you think of the way turret plating works now, if you are some sick solo lane player in fucking solo queue, you are basically you're training your robot to do exactly the opposite of this. Like, you're thinking every time the guy's dead or out of lane, I'll just push it into the tower and start getting the tower plating. But like, this might sound like a revolutionary concept to anyone who didn't watch Chinese League of Legends in Season 3. Sometimes you don't want the tower to go down. It doesn't matter even if you actually get money for it.
Yeah. Sometimes you're getting the classic example I would put from a solo queue standpoint is you're playing versus Nasus and you want to deny him from his stacks.
Yeah.
You don't want to put the turret down because you want to keep it up so that he's fucked. Because he can otherwise, you're going to be pushing and trying to contest him so far down into enemy territory that you're putting yourself in severe danger trying to deny him, or he can create a deep freeze. Whereas you don't take the turret down, which isn't really something you think about so much in competitive play anymore. But in the sense I'm talking about, you can just completely remove him from the game. And it's just understanding, this is your reward right now for pushing the wave, but what you're doing by it, you could potentially be denying yourself these next 2 waves because of it. Because
wait there one second. Pause there 1 second. I have to quickly tell someone something.
But also understanding those concepts creates those moments that we see on in pro games where someone just got ganked and they TP back to the wave which seems like really fucking dumb, right?
And people think why are they coming in? They're going to get attacked. Yes.
What a fucking idiot! It's like, well, this guy is visualizing the amount of creeps he's going to lose by walking back to the lane or waiting because the wave will crash and then bounce back to them, and he'll lose maybe 3 waves off of that. So dying if there's a chance he can outplay a second gank, that's almost. That sometimes you have to kind of take it, and you look really fucking dumb to the random.
Could also, obviously, and again, I know I got wrecked over this recently, even though I was absolutely right about my point. In that scenario, if you know it's going to fuck up 3 wave states, that's actually probably worth giving up the fucking gold for a kill.
Yes.
It's not even the end of the world. Even if the bad part of that happened, it might even be worth dying to reset it.
If you're losing 3 waves and the XP from 3 waves to get a kill, that's a losing trade because it's more gold and more experience from the waves than the kill.
Sure.
And there's times where you're going to see a player TP back to his turret when you know he's going to fucking dive and get dove again, but he's doing it because there's 2 or 3 waves at his fucking turret and he needs that XP or else he's fucked. He's less fucked by dying once more than losing that because then he's maybe 2-3 levels down and then he's completely out of the game. He can never fight him 1v1. He cannot contest the wave. He's going to give up complete priority. And his team's going to be playing 4v5 because the top laner is going to be able to move wherever the fuck he wants. And people don't see this because they don't understand it.
Yeah.
As simple as that. And top lane is actually the role where there's things people don't understand about the game very well, that when they see it in pro play, they flame pros for it. And I'm just like, there's actually a reason he's doing this, but you don't know because you're fucking stupid. You don't know. So,
it's also not that well publicized, to be fair, as well. But I agree.
No, and there's a reason it's not. But some people.
There's also super nerd shit. I always tell people that as well. That's how you know that. This is why, even though for my personal preference, I would flame things that are very casual and done in a simplistic manner. I do appreciate why they need to exist because if you ever go and look who the average fan is. They're not interested in chess. They don't want to read 700 openings and theory about this particular move from C14 with a knight or something. No one gives a shit. They want to know the fun aspects, the storyline of the player, what he did. If you can weave some of this in, great. But there's a reason why it's not on the broadcast. I kind of get that. But I do think actually, by the way, small side tangent. If/when they allow content creators to use the pro view, this is where I could see so much amazing shit being done.
I'm waiting for that. I don't know when that's going to happen. I don't know if it will ever happen because I could see Riot not wanting to ever happen since they're sort of losing money if they do so, which I don't actually believe that would be the case, but that's what Riot would probably believe.
Yes,
that's what they think,
I would be doing that very regularly myself, actually. If I wasn't with the team.
What I've realized, by the way, Malaclypse, sadly, is that this just shows the different starting positions. Riot appear to be almost cripplingly pessimistic about the average person who plays their game and what their brain can think about. I go way too far optimistic the other way. And I remember ending episodes thinking, this was straight fight, it's going to be great. And everyone's like, they're so boring on this show. Why were they just talking about that one matchup in that's oh God, they don't get it. Right, well, move on.
I mean, I think the thing about the Pro View, though, is that if maybe I'm just not the average person, but I would actually think it would encourage more people to buy it because you're seeing like a clip of someone breaking down the wave states, but they're not going to do every single one because no content creator is going to have the fucking time to do every single pro view of every single lane. And then so if they think something's really interesting, then that's like a reason to buy pro view, because as it is now, like the average viewer probably doesn't find ProView that interesting because you're not really you don't understand these concepts. But if you have someone who's in the public, like a content creator, explaining them to you, then that'll actually give you a reason to buy it because that'll help you learn more, right?
The obvious example would be, and I've even told him this, like if you were allowed to work a ProView under all circumstances, like if Shakara's just did a monthly video, like this is how this top laner wins his lane on this matchup. This is what you're going to do for the early levels. This is how you gain you'd spin it as you're going to gain elo if you do it basically. People would be so horny for that, especially because, by the way, I can tell you, I'll tie this in actually, something I've mentioned in the past. One of the interesting things is, supposedly in the chess world, the people who are the plebs are the ones who they're the equivalent of someone playing solo queue or like ranked in an esports game. They obsess over the opening and think if they can get a favourable opening, that's the key to winning the game. And so simple concepts like that is the shit, like that's supposedly the best seller, is stuff like new openings and, the latest opening. Like that's what all the like pleb fans are super horny for. You could really do that in League. Like concepts like map rotations, etc. Like half of that shit, they're not even going to be interested anyway, and they're not on a team. So like that's going to have very, very limited interest beyond the pro game. But I could totally see this being a killer format.
I mean, there's so much. Let's just put it this way: as a positional coach, having the pro view of this split is amazing because you don't actually get even very often the player's perspective when you're doing reviews for pro games. So I'm actually able to see Visichaci play his lane properly instead of watching the game and trying to guess, well, is this how the wave state is? Because I've developed the ability pretty fucking well to look at the mini map. I'm like, I think it's pushing into him. I think he has like 1.5 waves versus 1 wave. I can't really tell, but I think that's how it is. But now I can actually see it. I can see the gold difference, and I can see exactly how much gold he has and all of this. And
this is why Kelsey was way ahead of the game. This is where the joke is on all of us plebs who didn't watch the LPL, because LPL literally, we're talking like half a decade ago, used to have individual streams for each of the players. And so if you had a favourite player, you could just watch his whole fucking laning phase and see literally what vision he saw, where the jungle, like, it's actually, the amount of info you must get from that's unreal, like, Kelsey, because it's basically like Pro View, but back in the day.
I was going to do like I was literally at the time, because I had an apartment with a laptop and then 2 PCs because I was sharing with someone else, and so when my roommate went to bed, like I would use her computer to record. So I was recording because it would only broadcast live.
Oh yeah, they didn't say VODs of them. That was the bad part, right?
I recorded like 3 videos at once and then watched them later. So
I will admit, Kelsey, that's why I included myself in the pleb that didn't watch them, because when I first found out about this from you, actually, I was thinking, like, oh fucking hell, this is actually when Flame was on LGD. I was like, brilliant, I'm going to be watching all these. Where's the VODs? It's like, there aren't any. It's like, well, I'm not fucking getting up at that time in the morning and watch the. I don't actually care that much when you did the minions, I'm afraid. I'm going to have to let this one go. Right, what about this then, Malaclypse? So one of the concepts, as I said, was, in light of some of the players you've played with, like we set up a lot of the theory there. Right. If we talk about specific players, based on their narrative, based on their literal strengths, their player tendencies, we're going to immediately get into a lot of the interesting parts of this discussion anyway. So even though it was one, I noticed you said you didn't positionally coach, and as soon as I say this, people are going to totally understand why, is when you were working with Origin, obviously Soaz was the top laner. And if people remember, this was season 5. And so the interesting thing was, this was the season of lane swaps, when that was a heavy factor on the map. And in fact, this was even where Soaz kind of like resurrected his career, because a lot of people tried to imply, like from season 4 and so like he dropped off and whatever. Half of that shit's just because he didn't hit a Nexus one more time against OMG, but we'll put that to one side. Obviously he choked on that, didn't he, boys? Like, anyway, so the point is, this is obviously one of the parts where as the year went on for Origin, he was a very, very good player. When they brought in Gangplank, obviously that was a massive game changer. Like, the reason why I alluded to the fact that it's obvious Soaz didn't have a positional coach is because this is one of the things I love about Soaz. is he lacks so much tact in certain ways that he sometimes doesn't know when he's flaming people. Like, I did an interview with him right after this period, basically, where I asked him what he thinks of coaching, and his answer was, I've never had a coach. And this was in a public interview, and I was like... Yeah. And I wanted to just be like, you do know you are basically saying that everyone who was the official coach of Origin, like, wasn't a coach. Like, you are aware of what your statement means. But if you know Soaz, in his brain, it's like, well, why would I need a coach? I can do it all myself, no problem, right? Yeah. Who was Soaz as a top player from at least the time you were around him and from observing him?
I mean, particularly when I was working with Origin, this was at a time when analysts weren't really a thing. It was when I was an analyst, not a positional coach. We had a ton of analysts working with Origin. I say working. Most of them were volunteer. Most of them were like trying to get their start into the professional League of Legends. So I was just the person that was, okay, this is the meta. These are how lane matchups go. I talked with how draft should have gone. Soaz, as a player, I think he sometimes got mislabeled as particularly a tank player in recent years, when in reality, this is a guy that will play fucking anything. This is a guy that had a best of 5 competition with Wicked back in Season 3 to figure out who was going to go to All-Stars for Europe, because they were basically tied. And so Wicked is playing only Aurelia, and Soaz is picking wherever the fuck he wants, and he wins it with AP Nunu. This is a guy that will play anything. This is a guy.
By the way, I can confirm as well. Like the what's great about Soaz is he's one of those people where the people I love in esports, like on a narrative level, are the ones where like their story is the shit that you would make up as the creative license in a movie about someone's life. Like you would add in some sick stories. So like that story, by the way, of Soaz can play anything, etc. I'm not exaggerating. There are times when he was in Fnatic, the first Fnatic, where I literally know that there are times he just played shit in an actual match. He'd like played like twice in his life ever. And one might be a normal game.
And
like,
if I had to give a proper gauge, I think he's a very intelligent player and capable of theory crafting very hardcore. And the reason that he could just pick up something brand new is he's smart. And he sees how something should work, and he does it. This is, if you remember, we were talking about Season 5. This is when Gangplank got reworked. And for people that weren't around at that time, just as a friendly reminder, and this is a big fuck up on Riot's part, they actually disabled the champion on live servers. For like, what was it, 2 months, 3 months, something like that? For
what I really
lore reasons.
For lore reasons. What I liked that China did that no other server did was they enabled the Ghost Gangplank skin. So you didn't have to. They just had when you locked in Gangplank, he just had the Ghost Gangplank skin. And
so you could still play him, but it was
so you could play him on the Chinese server. I don't know why no other fucking server did that, because I think that's pretty
smart.
Genius.
Yeah, it's quite cool.
Shit. That's like
that still
nice.
Does the lore bullshit, but then it's just like you're not
like you can have your stupid lore bullshit thing, but it's still like you can still play the fucking champion.
But so speaking on Gangplank, in my opinion, during the Season 5 World Championship, he was probably the best Gangplank in the world. And this was at a time when there were some players that you wouldn't think that would be struggling to pick up a champion who were struggling to pick up a champion. The biggest point on this, when Origin was playing versus SKT in the semifinals, I believe it was. I think it was semifinals. This was at a time when Gangplank, Mordekaiser, and I forget who else were permabans on blue side. And I knew for a fact that Marin didn't play Gangplank, and Faker had a public interview in which he said he was struggling to pick up the champion. I was begging them to just be like, fucking yellow draft, ban random shit, don't ban Gangplank, leave it open, try to give it to Soaz as much as possible. It didn't happen, but that's what I wanted to see happen. Because I think if that actually happened, it could have made the semifinals much more interesting, because I do think that even in Season 6, when we started seeing Faker play the Gangplank, it was not as sharp as you would think a Faker champion would be. And part of it is I just think how that champion works versus what Faker played in the past and what he plays, it's not his style of champion.
What does that term mean by that? I'm not familiar with that. Yellow draft.
YOLO?
Oh, YOLO draft.
YOLO,
Right. I thought you said yellow.
Yeah,
I thought it was like
yellow
I thought it was
draft
like some
I
next level
apologize.
term where it's like because there's red and blue. You're like, well, if you do a yellow, that's where you sort of pretend you don't know what you're doing, and you bait them into leaving something and you pick it. I thought I give you more credit than it. Yeah, exactly.
Is you see the matrix and you create a third side of the map.
Exactly. There you go. There you go.
That would have been real next level. But no,
Yes.
I wanted to just fucking do something else and draft. Because
Right.
everyone was having to do the same 3 bands,
Sure.
and I just wanted to do something different. Because you're in semifinals versus SKT versus a team with a giant fucking dicks in the scene.
Yes.
You have to fucking mix it up. You're David versus Goliath.
Yes.
So come with the proper weaponry.
Yeah, for anyone who's not familiar with that story, David didn't just go in there and like fist fight with Goliath and wrestle him. Believe it or not, that might have been a losing battle within that
yes.
semi apocryphal story. You know.
Whereas with Origin versus SKT, we're trying to fist fight them, and it didn't end up well. I think we actually took a game off them. I forget.
I think it was 3-0 personally. I think both the sweeps. Yeah. That's why it was great. The real reason I remember that is because obviously that was the hype, wasn't it? Like, oh my god, Fnatic, they could do it, and it's like, and Korea 3-0s both of the semis, and all hope is lost. So, what about this then? So another part about Soaz that's obviously worth talking about. You alluded to it, Malaclypse, but Kelsey, this is one of the aspects where this is proof, right, that it doesn't matter how many times you say something intelligent. If someone doesn't care about it, they will just tune out every time. And in fact, they'll even get annoyed, and be like, why are you just bringing that up again and again? And they never see how essential it is. So if anyone's heard you or Veteran talk about Soaz when he was in this last iteration of Fnatic, one of the things you have always stressed from Season 7 onwards, because famously it was very impactful on Season 7 Worlds, is when you could tell when Fnatic shot calling was shit/non-existent, because the only way to win became give Soaz like nah, and then just let Jarvan, and then he will figure out basically how we should win this game. Something along those lines. Now, the reason why that's interesting is because if you, as Malaclypse said, people would think, I mean, I even saw this in a lot of the fucking threads about him and Whip over the last 2 years. People were like, but Soaz is the tank player. It's like, do you think it's a joke that he keeps saying he doesn't want to play fucking dog champions and that he wants to carry? Like, he is not doing this out of choice. Well, he is doing it out of choice, but you know what I mean? Like, begrudgingly, basically. So, what about this aspect to his career? Because I do feel as though that's one of the reasons he's had this amazing long career, because he didn't stay the player he was in Season 2 and then just hope the game changed around him. Like, to be fair, some of my favourite players, but whatever.
I'll mention he's the only top laner in the West in my top 10 of all time. There's a reason for that.
No, yeah, I think he's like one of the, I remember the last, so I'm probably going to do one of these lists again just because I kind of like doing it, but the last time I did one of the like top 5 players in each role of Worlds thing, I had Soaz on and everyone was like memeing the shit out of me. But like, it's this guy, so the thing we talked about with like weak side players, a lot of times like the better player on the team kind of has to be the weak side player if they understand the wave management better, right?
If they're a top player.
Yeah, if they're a top laner, like sometimes your good player has to be your weak side player just because he's not going to like fuck up his wave and overextend and die, right?
Yes.
So I think a lot of that is sometimes, so the way Caps, I wouldn't say that Caps is like bad at wave management, but the way that Caps plays his wave, if you watch like his games and his creeps, he's always looking for, and I think this, like, you kind of should play mid lane this way, but he's kind of looking for opportunities to, like, stall enemy back and make them overextend. So he wants his jungle near his lane all the time, right? Because then you can just, like, punish this guy really, really hard. So if you have someone who really wants to play the lane that way, then you need to have, like, people in side lanes who really understand wave management well. And that's where I think, like, Soaz and Reckless were really essential to the team. And then you put Bwipo in, and you end up in the situation where you saw like his very first matches where he was getting ganked like and dying constantly at MSI, right? So you see this like difference in how they're playing it out.
I mean, and just to like kind of jump off what both of you were saying, the things with Soaz, he is a shot caller. He's an incredibly intelligent player about the game in whole. And when I speak of shot calling, I mean making a game plan from mid game to late game and telling people what the fuck to do, because teams get lost. he's willing to play dog champs because one thing about Soaz is this guy knows how to initiate. He knows how to start fights, and he's not a coward. And that's one thing that I've seen and dealt with myself is you have to get players that aren't fucking afraid to go in and start a fight and recognize the fact that, hey, I might die if I do this, but this guy over here that's on the Azir, he's going to get a pentakill because I do it. Mm-hmm. And getting this mindset to players and for people to recognize that, yeah, the Azir carried the fight in a way, but the Azir got carried in the fight at the start of it by the tank doing his job. Or whatever champion. You can refer to Kennen as well, Nara as well. These are also champions that can initiate. If people don't see this, they just see the person that gets the kills, and they don't see the person that gives the opportunities for the kills. So as a player capable of being a hard carry himself, but he's also a player capable of facilitating a hard carry on his team. And the fact that he's able to do both so well is... It's why he's going to stand the test of time. It's why he's still going to play professionally. He'll be on a team next year. He'll be on a team the year after that until he decides to retire himself. Age isn't a matter in this. Yes. It's really just a matter of...
Also, like... oh, sorry. I didn't...
No. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that as much as Soaz memes coaching, it's because, like, it is down on coaching. I think it's because he thinks he can do it better. So I'd see him as someone who will retire and become a coach. Most likely.
Okay. I'll also say as a throw-in, by the way, like this actually ties into that theory that I'm developing. I just haven't got around to the point where I'm going to put it on paper yet of like the evergreen player, because I've told him one of the things I've always thought I did a pretty good job with in League is I could always kind of tell which players will endure and which ones are sick now, but you know, there's factors that make them kind of like flavor of the month basically, or they need a specific team to be like. Khan's a pretty good example. I called that guy pretty early, like it's going to be great when everything goes through him. When it isn't, it's not going to be so fun. So one of the things I've noticed that I think ties into this theory is I notice all the evergreen players. The problem is they're also very sick players. So people think it's because they have high skill or they're really motivated. I actually think one of the core hallmarks they all share is on some level, they all have a very deep and strong understanding of the, like, fundamentals of the game. Like, obviously, if people wonder, why do you go on and on about Frog? And it's like, people have been telling me, Malaclypse, since season 4 that everyone can lane and farm the creeps. It's like, that just isn't true. I mean, that's why I'm glad stuff like ProView exists. Like, you just go and watch some of the matchups this guy is playing and how he's not getting ganked on a mobile champions and how he's, you know, on this one, he's always like, even when that's a losing match. Like, I'm not going to go into the mid lane aspect here, but you see what I mean? Like, there's layers beyond that where when you notice those trends and everyone else doesn't, including some pro players, you think, fucking hell, this guy's going to be around a long time. This player can play as long as they want, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, there's things you can criticize about Froggen, but it's not about that. And I mean, you see this now in the Ricky Larson, who some people would be willing to say Froggen 2.0.
I've heard a lot of people criticize him, and all I'll tell you is this. You ask analysts, and they fucking love this guy. Like, this is one of their pillars that they're putting forward as like a high potential player.
Like, fuck you if you don't think Larson's amazing. The kid's
Larson is actually insane. Holy shit.
The problem is,
I only worked with him for like a week, but I have a lot of respect for, like...
The problem is, though, that's also just fan culture, isn't it?
How self-aware this guy is, and how young he is really impressive.
Yes.
I mean, I won't be petty and just tie this into some old contrast between two players that might have played mid lane, but I'm just going to say, if you are leader, mate, you can feed literally half your games if you want in pro play, because every game you carry, your rep will be 10 times Larson's, because in the games Larson's losing, he might have done some genius shit, but it's not going to appear on the screen to a viewer. Like, it's going to be lost, unfortunately, in the matrix. So it's just a sad reality of being a pro. You've got to kind of swallow that one and hope your coaches and your teammates understand.
Yeah, I mean, that's how it is too. Some teams might have more in the ear to hear what like the fans are talking about and what the casters are talking about, but at the end of the day, most talk to the coaches, talk to the analysts, they talk to the people that know their shit, and they know this is the kid with his shit. These are the players to look at. Yeah, these guys are getting hyped up right now, but they're not as hot as you think they are.
Along those lines, then, this is, I think, an interesting point to transition. Since you said you coached E United, and E United was famously where Licorice was. And by the way, I'll just go ahead and say this now. Again, if people could stop retconning history that they always said Licorice was a godlike top laner in E United, they didn't. That was not true whatsoever. Like, I was back then. He wasn't even a player on that team that people highlighted that much. Like, he was someone who had maybe a little bit of hype when people followed Challenger very closely, but he put it this way, he wasn't the guy like that everyone was waiting to come in LCS and he'd tear it up. It'd be amazing. They've just said that now because he became very good later.
No, everyone was hyping up Solo, actually.
It was actually insane how much Cloud9 got shit on for getting Licorice. I remember it's like, why did Licorice downgrade their roster, right? Like, it was all the shit by taking Svenskeren, who also had like a really, like every TSM jungler just...
They just tank their rep. They don't know it, do they?
They have a curse on them, man. I don't know what's
up. Do not join TSM if you're a jungler. Yes. Holy shit. Like, it's really tempting. You know, you have the temporary...
I used to think that was a meme. We were just, like, circling on Kelsey until the last two. After they ruined the last two again, I was like, but this is a real thing at this point in time.
But, like, I've done so much analysis of TSM's system and how it's so bad for junglers. Like, holy shit. But...
I won't say what I want to say, but it's not the junglers that are the issue on that team.
No, it's not the junglers. A lot of the times.
It's all right, Malaclypse. I like to blaspheme in that sense, so I get it out there. Don't worry. People find out why.
But it's
I think people know why.
But this is the thing though, because it's. But people are saying that they downgraded their roster, and that's why I made the video that was like the difference between the perception of EU and NA rookies and. Yeah. Like why people will automatically always shit on like NA rookies over EU rookies because of just like the inherent lack of experience. But Licorice was unique in the sense that he had a lot of, I think, like it's fair to say he had a lot of experience even as a rookie because he was the kind of player that LCS top laners wanted to scrim against, right?
I mean, let's put it this way. On United, daily, we refer to Flame as his boyfriend because Flame and Licorice would be running 1v1s with each other for a couple of hours. Impact had a decent...
By the way, for people who don't know, that is just a weird thing that Koreans are obsessed with, by the way, is actually going in a server and just like doing 1v1s. Like, people think that's a joke. Like, they literally, they like that shit.
Yeah, they do. They do. And I mean, I'll say that when Licorice went to Korea, which was during the time when Gilius and Fox were the two imports, the jungler and mid for E United. Okay. I believe part of the reason Dandy and GBM decided to join E United is because they noticed the rookies on E United at the time, which were Zazel, Deathly, and Licorice, and they were like, these guys are really fucking good, actually. For NA rookies, they're exceptional. And another part that people don't know, I don't even know if I'm allowed to talk about it, but I don't give a shit. Before that, United was a thing. When Licorice, Zazel, Deathly, Demonte, and Grigne at that time were basically C9's third team. When
that wouldn't even be a terrible team now in LCS. That'd probably be like fucking 8th or 7th. It's not a bad team.
When I was talking with the United, I told them that's the team they should have signed. I'm a fan of Gilius, not so much Fox. That was a good team to just sign right off. But I will say,
that's a pretty good like Gray's Sports Almanac moment. If you go back in time, like if you know, because I told people this, that one of the problems in the industry of esports, right, is people will come to me and they'll say stuff that shows they don't know the field. They'll tell me like, is there any like, you know, sort of top 10 Counter-Strike team I could sign? It's like, are you out of your fucking mind? Like, why would there be? Like, no, like, guess what? All the top 50 are all taken. Like, so you better have like all the money in the world and know the players, and you know, you've got to know you're paying for a premium, or you've got to do this. You've got to be the genius who figures out 6 months before that this player or this team has a sick like lineup and core, and you're going to get them cheap now and min-max your value. So the joke would be if you could go back to then and get that team and just do that whole lineup. Well, as people can guess, first of all, you could have accelerated some of those players' careers quite a lot. And you'd have this, like, total rookie lineup that would have mad potential in the future.
Yep. I mean, this was something people also don't know, which is something that commonly happens. So 2016 Worlds, this is when the C9 third team existed. Typically, by the end of Worlds, there aren't many teams to scrim left. They've all gone home. Yes. Samsung at the time, the last team that they scrimmed was that Cloud9 team. Licorice and all these players actually had experience against Samsung. They're the second place team at Worlds that time.
Yeah,
so
pretty good.
Something people don't know about, but it's fun to know about that.
Who is Licorice as a top laner then?
What was that?
Who is he as a top laner?
Licorice?
Yeah.
People know him, and I first scouted him and when I say scouted, I don't claim that I discovered him, but I was definitely one of the first people to say that this is one of the people to look at for the future. I knew him as a Fiora player. When he went to Korea, he was known for his Camille, and everyone thought he was a Camille one trick. And then people see that, oh wait, he can actually play Maokai really well. Oh wait, his Poppy is actually really good. He is someone willing to be creative. He is fairly lane dominant, actually. And he would outlane some Korean imports at times that you would not expect, and not in like favorable matchups. They would be completely raw skill matchups, and he would outlane them. His communication needed work at the time when I was working with him, and something that at that time I wasn't really specialized in, which in the future I got better at, which I wasn't working with him at the time, so I didn't work with him on that. But yeah, I don't know how he is now, but as then, he was someone that you could look at to carry a team, but you could also rely on to be versatile and be able to take the losing side. So
when I think of him as a player, just someone observing, and obviously I wasn't involved with any of the behind the scenes stuff, the interesting thing to me is that he had all this hype, and yet when I looked, a lot of his best games weren't I get a hard carry champion and get all the resources funneled. Instead, it was like I play some shit like Ornn or something, but I do such a great like job with the margins of what I can do with Ornn and what that gives the rest of the team. So, for example, if you're someone like Jensen or something, enjoy your picks all day long because this motherfucker's taking the bad part of the draft in theory. But as a result, look at the edge you're getting as a team.
Yep. The main thing I saw in him when I really started getting really excited about this player is, number one, when I see him in a really bad position and maybe he's like about to be in a 1v2, his at the second decision making and his critical thinking in short windows of time were incredible for a rookie. Number two, like you mentioned, he's someone that was able to take losing matchups and be on more supportive picks and be able to almost look like a carry on them, which for me, a rookie that can do that is not easy. Because as I mentioned, I think just being under the stress of being in a losing matchup, not being given resources, making the game more difficult for you to play individually, it's not easy to play from behind this game.
Sure.
So being able to do that and have the right mindset to carry forward with it is a big deal for me. And when I see that in a rookie, that's like, boom. Because that's, I'm not going to say that's not coachable, but it's not easy. And
it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier with the joke about coaching, where you tell them something and they go, yeah, I do know that. It's just in the game, I didn't do it. It's like the same thing. If I'm watching a game, right, and a guy dies early in the game or he's fucked up his wave, it's easy to think to it like, well, if he just then recognizes this and plays a bit more conservatively or calls for his team's help, you know, this is still fixable. It's not the end of the world. But in the game, people know that sinking feeling. When you get that sinking feeling, you panic, you do stupid shit. You start trying to just like go all in, or you start thinking that you can do something bizarrely otherwise, or that you can't win the game. There's obviously the biggest problem anyone who plays solo queue has is, and this is the most famous line ever, is they won't let themselves be carried. And if you're a top laner in solo queue, that is an essential quality. You have to know when you have fucked the game up. My joke used to be, if you fuck up the game enough times in the first 10 minutes on Renekton, just start building tank only, mate. That's your job for the rest of the game. Like, you don't get to have fun in League of Legends anymore. Your job is just, let's hope this motherfucker in AD carry or mid can carry this game because I've fucked my half up, you know. You don't get to keep going all in.
Yeah, it comes to the point where, and when you recognize and you tell your jungler, hey, don't come top anymore. We can't play through my lane. Do everything you can in mid and bot. I'm going to be TPing bot. Or let's play for bot. Again, it's not easy as a rookie, as a young guy, 17, 18, 19, that wants to look like the star, and you're just coming into the pro scene. You want to look good, and people in a community, I mean, like you mentioned, people shit on C9 and shit on Licorice when it was announced, and then I think within the first or second week, they ate shit on that. It's like, yeah, by the way, he's actually really good.
Sure.
He's really good.
Yeah, he is.
By the way, Also, try being a fucking pro jungler in a world in which your top laner doesn't understand that concept, and it's almost like being in solo queue, and he's demanding you come and basically waste your chance to win the game by fixing his problems all the time that he's just going to cause again. Like, in that scenario, it sounds fucked up, but you almost have to be that much of a strong jungler that you can just tell him, fuck off, I'm not doing it, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And Licorice is definitely more on the mature end of players out there. So he was very quick to understand that I'm not in the position to carry this game, or I'm in a bad matchup. Just, I will do my thing. I don't need help. Go help the other lanes, kind of thing. He understood that.
Yeah, a lot of times, like, rookies can't even do that, right? Because they don't know how to set their lane state so that they don't just die repeatedly.
Yep.
So a lot of times, like, they have to, like, I feel like the case with Bwipo, for example, like, he would have to be camped even if he was dying, because by his own jungler, even if he was dying, because he couldn't, like,
just feed more.
Stop it,
yeah,
right?
Of course. Yeah.
And that is actually, like, a difficult skill, to be honest. So yeah, I think that's, like, one of the hardest things to do in League of Legends, I would say, is just...
That's why I always thought the Joker Fnatic and the one where it was Bwipo and Caps was like, whereas one of the reasons I always used to personally downplay Marin is because I was like, well, no wonder Marin can do that, because he can have the jungler 24/7 top if Faker doesn't ever need it in mid. Like, that makes sense. The Caps one is even more ridiculous, where it's like, well, no wonder Bwipo could overextend all the time if Caps is doing it as well and going super aggro, and you basically have to pick between the two. You're on some mad Sophie's Choice level shit of like, which one do I pick? Who do I go and gank? It's like, in that scenario, you're going to get away with it a lot, because obviously they can't exploit two people's mistakes at the same time always.
Yeah, pretty much. And it comes down to the fact that if you're playing like that, also, you're eventually going to be giving them man advantage somewhere on the map, which is also something weighing on your mind when you're playing against a team like that.
Along these lines, then, let me think what I was going to say on that. A topic we could transition to. Actually, that's something I'd like to ask about then. Even though this isn't a player you worked with, as someone like, I've given the classic examples right there, Marin, Bwipo, Khan's another good one. These are players where when everything is set up through them, when the meta is as it should be, and when they can basically when all of their tendencies and strengths aren't like easily punishable or won't be punished in a game, obviously they will look amazing. Like, they've literally been called the best in their regions at times. How do you evaluate players like that then, if you come in from more of a coaching standpoint? Because I know clearly they've got some special skills that also do separate them, but there's some level of like game understanding that they actually kind of lack, and they just kind of have to exploit when that isn't something that is in the meta game that other people are going to attack. So how do you evaluate players like that? Because I know sometimes some analysts, they're the players that get dismissed actually. Like, they see them as like, yeah, but they're only good in that set. Like, there's something they're clearly very good at, right? So what are top players like that good at?
I mean, it depends, because Bwipo has shown the side of him where he'll just take the dick and feed and int his face off for 5-6 deaths, and then he comes to team fights and he looks like he can still carry a team fight, for example. Whereas I look at someone like Huni, who's very much the sort of player who...
We've said his name already, people. You know what's going to happen for the next 20 minutes.
Oh, goody. I'm excited.
He's being invoked.
Huni is the sort of player, like, what I'll credit him very well, and what people don't notice, actually, is he's very good at setting up the lane for maximum punishment for when his jungler comes to dive the enemy under his turret. They're fucked. They're going to lose 3 waves. He's going to probably take your turret on the next push. He's 2 levels ahead of you, 3 levels ahead of you. He's ready to carry the game. But, oh my god, even if you leave this guy isolated 1v1 in a skill matchup on tanks, he'll get fucking decimated. Like, in a tank matchup, so it's not that bad, and he's not dying. But he's 10, 15, 20 CS behind and a level and a half down, and it's like, this shouldn't be happening, dude. It shouldn't be happening, but his jungler is never coming top. He's fucked. He's fucked in these situations. And when he's on a carry and he gets counterpicked, or he's not getting the jungle resource that he needs, it looks bad.
Who is the player in solo queue back in the day before we had roles who just says like, pick me this, I will carry game? And it's like, you think, oh, the fuck's this guy? Well, it's right, you actually better pick him that, or the game's over.
Yeah, the game's over.
You literally have to do that. It's not even a request.
I mean, you saw an Echo Fox where... Oh, go ahead, Kelsey.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is the thing where it's like, I think But whenever you see top laners like this, it's not that they can't like physically play tanks. It's that there's like an aspect of the game that they can't like perform. Or I think with Huni, honestly, it's reset timings more than anything. Like his resets are always fucking dog shit. Like he's always staying extra, and then someone will TP back with an item, and then he'll try to 1v1 them again, and he'll die. So like those types of situations are like he just maybe he gets it probably. Like a lot of these top laners, a lot of these types of players are just really self-aware and they get it, but they just don't do it, or they don't think they can't like rationally think it's good, and they keep trying to do it. Stuff like with like UZI and caps, like stuff like this. Whereas I think like Huni's problem is just bad, you know? Like it's not different, it's just bad.
And goes off to go off of that, it does come from reset timings, and it's why he always requires counter matchups to have put a priority in that lane. Because when he doesn't play a priority laner, when he doesn't have that push, he is much more dependent on knowing how to play the wave and creating a bounce and creating a favorable position to make the reset from. And that's where he fails, because he doesn't know how to do it.
What I find so beautiful, by the way, about Huni's career is it's like, as usual, this is where very, very linear thinking will fuck people, because the logic they're going to go with is either Huni was really good but something happened, or it was all Rainover. And it's like, no, did you not see Rainover's career after they left each other? Like somehow the two of them had like that perfect intersection of like flaws and strengths that made them both look really good, but they were both overrated.
I mean, I could see Huni being able to learn this if he's willing to learn it. I just don't know if that's the case. I've never talked to him. I don't know.
I would say, unfortunately, from the little I know, the last few years, it's also, you can't really judge him in vacuum as though every year was like the same mentality. Like, as far as I can tell, the last couple of years, he has kind of just done like the victory lap, get paid big time in NA, and it's not about winning the world championship, for example, you know. So to be motivated to do that and change his style of play, I don't know if he's mentally in the place to do that right now.
Nope.
Probably not. And I was like another player that I kind of shit on for similar reasons, but maybe more contentious because it's more recent was Khan.
Of course.
But remember going in.
My joke is Korean Huni. I always like that joke just 'cause it's so whack, but it works every time. Whenever you get it, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, he is a player though that I see he loves to play. I say he loves. I don't know if he really loves it, but he'll go back to Victor, for example, which is I feel like one of his champions if he actually does feel comfortable on. So I think in the case of Khan, he is like Huni, but he's the Huni that's self-aware and does want to be a champion and is trying to develop that skill set. And it might be
he tries to play, sometimes as the weak side player and stuff. It's just unfortunate. I don't think it's the strength of his.
Yeah.
But
I mean, that's fine.
People wondered why like Longju struggled in Ardent meta, but it's like that was a team that could literally only play 1-3-1. Like they could literally only play it, and it was a lot of it was because of Khan. So it's because he didn't understand, like weak side, he didn't understand, like for him, a big thing is like flanks and teleports that he's really atrocious with.
Yeah. Which is kind of a thing for top laners, in case anyone hasn't been following the games this season.
That's why like, he has to play like hard split because he's good at that. Like that's a good skill of his, but
he's very good at it. He understands cross map pressure. He understands the limits of how much he can split. He understands when he needs to back off, how to play kind of coy and look like he's taking a reset, but then when the enemy, he kind of has that game sense, that Spidey sense in him that they've come and they were trying to look for him, but now they fucked off and went to the other part of the map. He's still there and he's going to keep pushing, and now you just lost your in him, and it's just like,
I always said this, and I don't know why some players haven't figured this out, Kelsey. I always said this. Khan is one of those Koreans who it's like, dude, just go to the LPL. Go to an LPL team. Like,
he was
the whole
LPL,
team around. No, but I mean, like be on a team where that, like now, where you'd have the rep that they might build the team around you, and just get them to get the coach and the rest of the players to do everything you need. And then the idea would be, listen, they're only going to go as far as you can go with your strengths. So you might not be the best team, but you might be like still a very good team. You might, you maximize all your strengths. You could be a very good player.
But it's like, I think you need, for Khan's play style to work, you need like a very stable midsection. And by that, I mean like bot lane and jungle. So I think it was, so it was just sad because like it's funny because you tell like Americans that Longju is a team that can literally only play 1-3-1, and they're like, but that is an advanced game concept. Only people from the future can play out. Exactly. It's like, no, there are actually teams that can literally only play like side laners or 1-3-1 because of their player limitations. It's a very different kind of like bias, but it's like kind of hard to say that to some people, like this style of play is not more advanced, right?
Sure.
It's just it requires different skill set.
Well, to be fair, if they've also listened to any of your shows for the last 2 years, Kelsey, they're like, but you're always criticizing people who don't understand this advanced side lane concept, and he understands it, so...
I mean, you're on a show with two Americans, and we both seem to understand what the side lane is, whereas the league that we come from, that is the major league, they don't seem to understand it sometimes, so...
The sad thing is, I actually asked a few people about this on more recent shows every time I get a chance with coaches, and unfortunately what they tell me is beyond depressing. Like, they even say it's not even that, like, there's no players can do this. You definitely got players who can do it. Obviously, some of them do it in solo queue. He said the big problem is that most of the players in these LCS teams just don't feel comfortable doing it. And then what happens is, if the coach is one of those guys who is in almost like the sports cycle of like, I have to just get as many wins as I can. It's not about like the style and developing the team. I'm just trying to get wins this week. They think to themselves in their brain, why trust these idiots to fuck up the game because they feel uncomfortable? Why not just fucking team fight in mid, like as everyone does in our whole region?
Yeah, I mean,
safer.
Sometimes it's like that.
I mean,
sometimes it'd be like that. Exactly.
Like it shouldn't be like that. Like you have to really fight for it to not be like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I can sort of sympathize with coaches who don't have the energy to do that and get out of bed when their team is like 0-10. But it's like sometimes you gotta just say, okay, we're gonna learn the game now.
Yeah. So. Like if it comes down to split pushing, from what I basically understand, the players that want to be in the side lanes understand how to do it, but the people in the mid lane that need to avoid getting engaged on, that's who's fucking up.
Don't worry. One of my joke favourite teams, the old Golden Guardians, when I'm watching my boy Froggen, the few times I ever saw them actually, because, you know, they were just the team that in the spring split would just, like, do nothing and then hope the other team, like, ints an engaged team fight that they can win at 40 minutes.
Yep.
Well, don't worry. Here's the thing. I could tell the coaching staff was trying because they had a bunch of games where they were in winning positions trying to do 1-3-1. And exactly what you've just said is what would happen every time. The three in the middle didn't seem to understand the premise that they are three people. Yeah. And if someone started a fight, they were like, brilliant, it's a team fight. It's like, you've got three people. Like, what's the odds? And you're near their tower. What's the odds you're going to win this?
I remember when we did an episode of Narrative Week where I had like fucking I Will Dominate and St. Vicious on, and they were telling me that like 1-3-1 is not the optimal way to play the game because midsection will always get forced on if enemy team has Ornn, and I'm just like, okay.
That's a difference between the theoretical and their practical experience, isn't it? Like,
yeah, it's like, but it's true. Like, there are actually like people who have a high level of understanding of the video game who actually think that 1-3-1 is just like impossible to consistently execute.
I mean, I think it comes down to, and it's something that players do struggle with, which is coming down to like feeling the pressure on the map, knowing how much pressure you're drawing and how much pressure is elsewhere on the map, and understanding which pressure point is the most important for the enemy to address. Yeah. And NA, this seems to be a skill that's just completely non-existent. It doesn't seem to exist. Or if it does, it's very rare. It's a problem.
Well, there's the other classic one, isn't it? Of where you know that like a player, probably if you stopped the VOD after the game and said, what were you thinking here? Like, you know, they're going to come and gank you. He was like, no, but I had a free lane. Look at all the CS I could be getting. It's like, give me a break. Yeah. You didn't even need vision to know they were just obviously coming in for that now, mate. Like,
I've heard it before.
And even some players in Europe who are like, you know, AD carries who used to play in Season 6 and that being... But anyway, you fill in the blanks on that one yourself. Fill in the blanks on that yourself.
I think like a lot of parts of it, though, is that literally solo queue does... Like, the solo queue environment in NA doesn't reward you for developing that skill.
Sure.
It just doesn't at all. So it is a concept that is almost solely applied in pro play in North America. Yeah. It's not something that you can learn in NA solo queue. So
again, the top laners, I feel like, know how to do it. We know how to split push. I'm spanking as a top laner myself. I play top lane in solo queue. Mid laners, they tend to split push. And
I think we know where this is going, by the way, boys. Which role wants to team fight all the time?
80 carries and the supports.
I have no idea, man.
I'm just saying, if you got... Listen, I love me some Doublelift, but I reckon if he's in your game, you're probably not going to be doing a lot 1-3-1-ing. Probably not going to happen, I'm afraid. There's a reason why every team he's in has to be amazing at team fighting and have players that are amazing at team fighting. It's very logical.
Like you have players like, okay, so we're probably going to transition over to Impact next if I'm following.
That's the logical one, exactly.
That Thorin is formatting the show.
You've picked up some things over the years, yeah.
But you can probably guess just based on like people. Soaz and Impact kind of have some similarities in the sense that people think that they're like only tank players, but like they kind of have to take the responsibility of the way that their team is set up, right?
I mean, if anyone's watched Team Liquid recently, I don't think they can say that anymore, by the way. I think people kind of woke the fuck up and they're like, yeah, by the way, this guy that has a world championship under his belt and his skin is Jax, yeah, he could actually carry games. Holy fucking shit. Who would have thought of that, right? Wow.
And tie the two things together. Right? Why? Even if he had a carry champion, he's not going to get resources all game long when Doublelift is in the bot lane. Like they have made their bed in that sense, and they're going to line it. Like by the way, they're totally happy with that. Obviously, like if you have Uzi, if you have Doublelift, you're going to play around them heavily. Of course, they're so good at what they do. It makes sense. It's just the problem is the knock-on effect of what happens to the other players. Like with players like this, unfortunately, I mean, it's always going to be the case. Unfortunately, for weak side players, generally is. Even though they should get extra credit for what they did in some respect, they actually get less credit and more credit goes to the player that they're actually helping. It's bizarre because it would be like the equivalent of if in basketball you counted the assists of the point guard and then gave them to the person that scored the buckets. It's like, what? Well, no, he gets the points for the bucket. The other guy gets the assist. Like, why would he get all of it? Like, this is unreasonable. But Impact clearly a classic player for this topic, right?
Yep.
I mean, he's literally famous for, everyone would say immediately the two words, absorb pressure.
Yes, I mean, this is one of the best Gangplanks in the world. Ooh, this is a champion that he can be under his turret, he can be getting dove, and the team that's diving him is probably the one that's actually in more danger than the Gangplank is, because this is a guy that...
Oh, mate, anytime my boy Flame ever got Gangplank in NA, and then they tried to 2v1 dive him, I was like, get ready for the show. Yep. I've seen this one before.
Yep, same thing. Flame's also very good on Gangplank, but... Impact as a player, he is one of these players willing to take the dick for the team because he generally doesn't care. Like when I say he doesn't care, he cares about winning, but he doesn't care about the position he's going to be put in because he understands the game to such a point that he understands that the trade that just occurred on his side of the map is a losing trade for the enemy because his team just got something for us elsewhere.
Right. Okay.
And in that case, it's Doublelift getting this. And when Doublelift is getting it, it's very good for Team Liquid because this is a team that runs off him. And on another point, this is a player typically, I think especially with Cloud9, some people thought that his communication must not be good because he's a Korean import and he must have trouble speaking. But I can rest assured on Team Liquid, he was effectively the second major voice on that team with Doublelift. Those are like the two major voices on that team. And this is something people couldn't believe when I tell them this. And I don't know, obviously, in Season 9, if this is still the case. They have Core JJ, they have Jensen. The team's different now.
They have a very experienced team, to be fair now.
Extremely experienced team. But Impact, I could sort of see, especially with how the game's evolved and how important as a carry, like if you're on carries, it's important to understand how to demand the resources that you need to be able to carry. Like my jungler, I need you up here to cover me on this push. I need this, I need that. I don't need this, I don't need that. Understanding this and being able to communicate is very important. So this is also a player that actually has very good communication skills. And people don't believe that because he's Korean, he must not be able to speak English. But I've never had, like when I talked with Impact, granted I talked with him over chat, I didn't actually speak with him. There was only one occurrence where a translator needed to like transmit what I was saying to him. And it was because it was a very long paragraph with quite a few large words that I should have probably learned how to reword properly and make it a little bit shorter because obviously it's a second language for him. But
by the way, Kelsey, since it's obviously been a point of contention over the years, I will say one thing I will concede is I think part of why there's been a misconception about what I think a shot caller is people think that I think every shot caller should be high. No. Like, one of the things that's actually probably mad underrated about League of Legends shot calling is you're not saying like whole paragraphs. You might even be saying a word, but it's about being the person who in that scenario can say the word, like could be engage, back off, at the time when that is the key call. So obviously if Impact doesn't need to be able to read a fucking like Moby Dick, he just has to be able to say go in now or like back off, I teleport. Like it could be very simple, but as long as he has the decisive nature, he can play that role, obviously.
And his ability to understand those timings, particularly with his teleports or his Shin TP or Gangplank ults, like his understanding of that trigger moment and that half-second period when it's just a critical mass of when he's doing it is actually incredible. There aren't many players that could do it. And for me, when I say he's one of the top laners, I rate highly, like the most highly. Like he will be the first or second Hall of Famer in my books. People will criticize that because it's like he's not a carry. He hasn't really carried many games, and it's just like he has, but yet he's not the one with the score that shows.
The joke would be, and this is what we need to come up with somehow, but I don't know what the term would be, right? The funny thing is, right, Hai literally fought the narrative that he was like a weak mechanical mid laner and that it was mainly his shot calling and, the other things that was making him amazing. He fought that as hard as he could, right, for as many years. And then here's what's weird. At the very end of his career, actually basically when he basically transitioned away from mid and then came back for Golden Guardians, I actually saw from some interviews that he finally got it because he himself was clever enough to change the narrative. He coined a term which was like, I was a support mid laner, which obviously the concept to other people didn't exist. They thought mid laner has to be the one who carries the game. So if you were genius, what you need to do is come up with a concept for basically, I mean, I kind of had it myself. This is the way I spun what Flame did when he was in Blaze, when he could no longer play carries. What I said was, he doesn't play in the way that like Looper and Acorn do, where they just play tank, common tank in the game. And the idea is they let the others win the game. What he would do was he would play a matchup where you could still get a slight edge. So he would play a non-carry threat matchup as though it was a carry, and he would get a small edge in that way. And so I don't know what the term would be. We need a term like that for these players because, as we said, Soaz, Impact, in this sense, they get criminally underrated because people don't realize they're actually probably boosting up some of the carries on their team by existing in the game. So by the logic of only the carries, the one who could be like the Hall of Fame player, well, by that logic, we should actually strip the carry status away from some of those other players. They wouldn't have done that if they'd have had some average top laner. They wouldn't have been capable of being so amazing and carrying the game.
I mean, it's not a flashy name, but I would call them facilitators. Mm-hmm. They facilitate who is the carry on that team at that time, but I don't know if that's really the best word. Maybe I should come up with a better one, and it's not like the greatest term, but that's how I think about it. They're the ones that are facilitating these leads and making it and allowing it to happen.
Because, by the way, I'll give you the obvious other version, and everyone gives this person credit, funnily enough, is the AD carry version is fucking Prey. No one has any problem saying he's one of the greatest of all time, but if you want to judge him but strictly by carrying and smashing the lane, he's never going to be I'd literally take fucking Forgiven over him in that sense. But tell you what, if I want to put a world championship team together, I would take Prey in an instant.
Yeah, I mean, I think Prey is actually, like, his laning is super good too. So that's like one of the big things as well, is that just judging it by, like, I think you need to have both roles that we're kind of differentiating here, like both the quote unquote carry and the facilitator, if that's the term Malaclypse wants to use, is like both of them have to understand like wave management pretty well, right? So a lot of times to develop like the carry mindset, you have to understand when an opportunity isn't just good for you, but it's good for like the whole map, right? So like when we talk about what Caps does, right, where he's like constantly calling the jungle over, but you can break open the game, right? If you have a situation where the enemy mid laner wants to back here, because if you are in his position in the matchup and you can hold the wave here, you know that he's going to bring his jungler over and you can bring yours, and if you guys win 2v2, then that fucking like wins the game. You can win the game off of that in like 3 minutes, right?
This is the reason why everyone thinks every analyst I have on my shows is being nasty to Broxer, because they don't understand what is basically, I'll just summarize it like this for anyone, and hopefully you can get this now. What they're criticizing isn't actually always what he does. It's what he didn't do. And so there will be times when he didn't take an advantage that could have broken the game open or put his team ahead. But because his team isn't losing, and they might still, in fact, win the game, and to you, a solo queue player, it looks like this is fine. Yeah, everything's okay. You don't realise that at the end of a game, yeah, we can all look at mistakes and say, if I'd have done that differently, I'd have won the game. But the mistake people make is not looking at like, here's the missed opportunity I didn't take. Maybe if I'd have done this at this point in the game, the whole game changes completely.
Yeah. And so that guy has to be the one who's like demanding the jungle attention that wins the game for the team. Whereas like the other type of player who like is like the impact and, you know, these more, I guess, these less highly rated players. Yeah, Let Me for sure is like a really, really good example. These types of players, they have to like have similar level of understanding of like how the game flow is, just so that they can create wave states that like aren't abusable in the same fashion, right?
Like, put it this way, if anyone thinks that like RNG not being the best at the moment is because Xiaohu and Uzi don't know how to play League of Legends, they don't have the same top laner. They had a top laner who did all these things we're talking about anytime it was needed. Well, I'd fucking love to play with a player like that if I'm them.
Like, he had this insane reputation for basically, like, the way that Chinese fans talked about him was that he could like bring any top laner down to his level, but that's because like he could freeze the wave at the right point. So when people came to gank him, like it looked like they were shitty, right? Because they would just die. It was like this, what you were talking about with like the GP, they would die diving him, or they wouldn't get anything, and he'd be down CS or whatever because he had to be. But that would be.
I mean, he was laning against like, you know, the Shy and stuff on a team where you want to put everything in Uzi. That makes kind of sense.
Yeah. So,
right, what about this then? So, a player we've referenced already, I want to talk about now, Malaclypse, because it's someone where I feel as though actually, like, I don't even know where the public narrative would be, aside from he just plays Poppy, which isn't a narrative, by the way, it's one champion you play, is obviously Visichaci. And he's someone who's had a very interesting career. And I will say, one of the reasons why he's not so well known in terms of, like, the specifics of his play is, to be fair, he hasn't played on top teams for most of his career, because the Unicorns, a lot of teams he was on were usually, they were the teams trying to min-max and get these players that were, like, either rejects or no one else, like, highly scouted them, and they were just trying to work with what they had. So, Who is this player, Visichaci?
Honestly, in the same light of, you know, Soaz and Impact, where you have a player who understands the game extremely well. This a lot of people might not know this, but Visichaci is actually fairly decently ranked in chess. Okay. He is a chess player, so he'll play the game like it's chess in a way, which is sort of fitting. He gets branded as a tank player, but then I remind people last split in spring, he's playing Renekton versus Aurelia, which is a one-sided matchup pretty much for Renekton. There's very few windows for Aurelia to ever actually win that, but he kind of, I don't want to say he made fun of Wonder. He just maintained a 30-40 CS lead and just made Wonder's Aurelia look like, whatever. You can give Wonder Aurelia, I guess, just play Renekton into it. If Visichaci can do it, anyone can do it. But that's not always the case. I mean, I don't know if I could reference like what day it is properly, but today you're seeing he's playing GP versus Kled into Fenn's Kled. Fenn is known as pretty much the best Kled in the world. He is known as a Kled one trick. He has hit rank 1 in EU as a Kled player. He played the previous day Kled into GP and did well, but Chachi made fun of him. Like, got a 40-50 CS lead, which is kind of how the matchup is actually supposed to go if you play it properly. And he is a player that people will mislabel because when he plays poorly, it looks very bad. But when he plays great, you don't always see what he's doing because it's his wave management and it's his communication that is actually doing all the work on that team.
Well, the problem is, mate, if he plays great, then the MVP's Kobe. Congrats.
or
that's the thing I think would be,
but I mean,
of course.
they deserve it too because they're also playing great, but at the same time Visichaci is the one that's like helping make it happen, and people don't recognize that, which is kind of a shitty thing for him, that people don't recognize how much he is actually doing on that team. It's if it's a different top laner, it might not happen. Like, you need players like Chachi, like impact, like Soaz, to make your AD carry, your star mid laner, your star AD carry look like a fucking star, to make them shine brighter. And if you don't have it, they're going to dim out. And you can see teams that have these star players that dim out because they don't have these supportive players.
This is the reason why the team I always said I thought was a great example of this was actually the season 6 H2K that ended up going to Worlds and coming top 4. Because the reason why the second they made that team, I was like, holy shit, this team looks amazing, is because they had exactly this sort of like, again, these terms are kind of antiquated terms, but carry, threat, balance. Because obviously Odoamne could play carries if you needed to in the right meta, if the AD carries more of the Ashe, Jhin, etc. Or if you need Forgiven to be on the hard carry, then Odoamne is going to facilitate that. So that's the really, for me, the conclusion on that one is that's the reason why like most super teams don't work, is because when you say super team, most people think of each person's like a hard carry funnel of resources. And if you have 3 lanes like that, you can try and make it work, but it's going to be an uphill challenge. Whereas if you had 2 of those, and then this is why the C9 examples and TL ones are the perfect ones, because early this year, fans would say, yeah, they got Jensen. Now they just need to upgrade top lane. It's like, guys, I don't think you've been following like what the concept is here. Like, if you actually got a better top lane of what you're thinking is better, you would almost certainly make the team worse.
Yes, you would.
100%. I would say that maybe Visichaci is... I don't think Visichaci can be like the sort of demanding player. That's just like kind of my perception of him. Whereas I feel like players like Soaz could be. If that makes sense. Like they could be the ones who create opportunities rather than like minimize enemy opportunities. I don't think they have the same skill set. So I would say that would be like why I would rate Visichaci a bit lower. But at the same time, I think understanding how Xerxes and Norscarin are as individuals, I would say that having Visichaci, like it's actually so strange how Splyce operates given the personalities of their support jungle duo who are supposed to be sort of dictating the pace of the game, right? It's really interesting that they can operate with a quieter support jungle duo by having maybe someone like Visichaci, maybe someone like, I don't know what Humanoid's comms are like, but it sounds kind of like that's kind of the thing that makes me rate Visichaci a little bit better. So he's maybe more like a high style top laner, you know?
He is, and he is also a player because, you know, he's 26, which for in League Esports, that's starting to get old, right?
Sure.
In my experience, he's probably the most well together and mature players I've worked with and that I know of. And his ability to actually stand as a leader on that team when it's necessary is also really paramount to that. And he's like, Kobe and Humanoid are definitely the carries on that team. Xerxes is definitely that star jungler that's helping make that happen. But Chachi is the person that is able to keep it all together. And when you're not able to keep it all together, when you have all these other players, it will eventually fall apart. And you need that on the team. Again, like same with Impact, same with Soaz. And it's very strange because you start seeing the trend. It's like, yeah, these top laners seem to actually be talking a lot and like making things happen. And it's because they're the ones with teleport on their keyboard, even though now these days you see 3 or 4 fucking teleports in the game.
6.
6? Where is the hell 6 coming from?
I think if OG plays G2 in the right game, you could have 6.
6 in total. You could say like 7 if you say like
3 on each team.
5. 3 on each team, and then 0.5 because support takes spellbook. So.
But I mean, there's a reason for that, and it definitely comes down to teleport as a spell, but also I think top lane, because of how the lane is played and because we are the most volatile role, we are the role that has to adapt the most as metas change. And I'm looking at you, AD carry mains, crying and bitching and moaning about, oh my god, there's a Yasuo in my lane. Oh my god, there's a Cassio in my lane, where we've had tanks, we've had mages, we've had ADCs, we've had everything in top lane over the years. we've never bitched about it. We're basically the abused lane of League of Legends, and we're the ones kind of carrying forth the effort and letting all the people that want to whine and cry and be the stars do the show, because you kind of have to be able to hold it together. It's a stressful role, and the stars of that role, like the ones that will stand the test of time, the evergreen players, as you put it, Thorin, the Soaz, the Impact. Honestly, Visichaci kind of stands in that. He hasn't been on the greatest of teams in the past, but he is sort of, I would almost consider him an evergreen player as well. I don't think his time is coming up or anything like that at all. You need these players to be able to hold the team together, because when you have players that can't do that is when your team's going to fall apart.
All right, what about if we talk about where the meta is of top lane now?
Yes.
Because one of the interesting things, obviously, and I mean, every discussion has to be skewed by this nowadays, but if you look at G2, one of the reasons why I notice they are an absolute mess for people trying to figure out, like, which player did what and who's the best player, and who he, like, was that guy actually losing his lane, or was he supposed to later on use the champion for something different? Like, they've done the best job of, like, confusing everyone, but this is kind of the most extreme version of what League is now. So what is the concept now as to how top lane fits into the meta? And has it just become a game where, like, can any lane carry? Can no lanes carry, and you have to carry through a certain lane depending on what the comp is or something? What world are we in now?
We're in a world where every lane is capable of carrying. Top lane in particular is kind of tight because you have flexing going on now, right? So mid laners and top laners are going to swap champions around, and it started with your Akali and Aurelia and Aatrox. These were like the champions who first started doing it, and then now you're starting to see Renekton. Now, I mean, LCK, when Aurelia mid was really huge, you actually saw Darius getting pulled out into mid and top lane as an answer. You don't see it much anymore. You're starting to see Corki top. You're starting to see Azir top in Asian leagues. You're seeing Nico flex between lanes with different builds. And it's really, that is definitely part with top lane where it's understanding how the waves need to be managed, where jungle is pathing, what's optimal for your jungle to path to get the maximum of their resources, and ultimately who's outscaling who, what our win condition is on the comp, and making that happen. So to answer the question, where is top lane meta at? It's a mess, but it's a fun mess. And it's a mess where if you're
there's a lot of opportunity.
There's a lot of opportunity. I mean, you're seeing Wonder. I mean, let's disregard the Garen pick and the Annie, because I think that was fucking nonsense.
Those are stupid, yeah, of course.
He's capable of playing Victor. He used to play a lot of Rise. Karma obviously stands at the top right now as well. These aren't exactly hidden and revealing strategy. Everyone knows Karma's a little bit of an XD champ right now. Top lane meta, it comes down to, can your team flex pick? Do you have answers to flex picks? Do you know how to draft around the fact that you're flexing? And if not, how do you deal with it? Because there are only so many champions that you can blind pick safely and not get fucked for it, because red side has counter pick.
Yeah, there's a small concept for people to think about for a second. Yes. When you're judging a player who plays in LCS or LEC, if, let's say, he's either a top laner who's amazing or a mid laner who's amazing, but his corresponding solo laner on his team isn't very good and doesn't have a wide champion pool, there isn't any of the old school shit of, like, just pick him what he is good on. It's like, well, then they will just swap the lanes, won't they? And they'll now, you can't, like the counter pick is different in that sense as how it works in the draft, you know?
Yes, exactly. Like, you can, if you understand how to play the wave and how jungle needs to path in regards to when you're pushing the wave, you can actually play anything you want in top lane. It's and this kind of goes right, we're kind of right back to season 1, which was the case then. It's, you can play whatever you want if your team and your jungler and your mid laner and complete regards, those 3 roles know how to facilitate it. Because part of it isn't just the jungler, it's the mid laner knowing when to move and helping the top laner. And likewise, top lane moving to mid lane when they have the chance to help them to help fix their wave state, for example. I don't know if I'm properly answering your question, by the way, because I'm It's
well, what we'll do
broad.
is I noticed for this episode especially, because like one of the things I do as a host, basically, it's the same thing I did in interviews, is some of the first questions or topics are also to feel out what makes sense and how someone explains themselves. So I've noticed in this episode, actually, it has worked when we talk about the player specifically, because then when you talk about their tendencies, you tie it into the meta and you talk about how that contrasted with what their role was in their team. I think more than the pure abstract, that's easier to talk about. So since you referenced Wonder already, how about we reference another very high profile top laner in League of Legends right now, which is the Chi for IG, because this is a player where the big problem with this player is if you're talking to the most casual fan, you have to sort of constantly steer them away from the idea that he is a season 2 top laner who's just smashing the lane all the time and that all he's doing is just going all in 24/7 on a really broken pick, because like obviously that isn't even the game in any context now. So Kelsey, where would you start us off on this? Like, what is someone like the Chi doing in League of Legends right now?
So IG basically fucking ruins everything we said about how you need to have like a good survive player who understands wave management. Because
it would have been a dark time if they'd won at MSI, wouldn't it? And Worlds back to back. Like they would have destroyed analysis forever. We actually had a team, by the way, as a quick side tangent, in CSGO that the same thing happened with. In CSGO 2 years ago, a team came along that didn't have all the roles you probably need in a team. They just had insane fraggers, and they just, for the first few tournaments, stomped everyone. And what's sad is, I did an interview after their most dominant win, where someone asked me, so this team should be the best team from now, right? And sadly, this interview, the person's recorder failed, so I never got to have this like ultimate, like moment where you call the shit before it happens. And I basically told them, well, no, actually, personally, I think they will fall off now, and they will fail to win everything because, they fundamentally don't have some of the core principles you need. And so I said, this is the epic line that would have been so good. I said, if they go on and do it, I will have to basically reconsider everything I know about Counter-Strike and maybe even the way I've modeled it. But based on the things I know so far, they almost can't succeed. Like they're basically like ice skating uphill. They're going too much against the stream of the way the game is. So IG, to some degree, I mean, we've had this discussion many times before, but the problem is when they're at their best, it's very easy to like impute to some of the players things that they aren't doing. Like, maybe I'm wrong on this, but I don't feel as though Ning is like on some genius next level read all the time. I feel like MLXG, I think he'd just do that on any team with any of those players.
I'm actually kind of disagree a bit, because I think that the way that IG plays requires so much more from their jungler than any other team.
Okay.
I think
set it up then.
So like, I think IG's kind of concept of how to manage waves is pretty fucking bad. And that's just because they'll just play the fuck up in their lanes like 100% of the time. If you're gonna do that, you're basically requiring your jungler to always move first, always make a better trade in terms of like the win condition of your composition than the enemy jungler will, right? He always has to do that, and he varies what he's doing a lot. So obviously he looks really fucking trash when it fails, but that's the way his team is set up. For like almost all of the blame and all of the responsibility to fall on Ning to make the right move in the early game. So when it works, like he looks really good and he actually can understand these concepts pretty well. Like I don't think he's some next level genius, but I do think that he understands, like he has an idea of where he wants his team to be in the mid to late game in terms of like how they should be playing at the map and what he needs to set up in the early game for that to occur. And he almost always tries to execute it. Sometimes he looks sometimes he doesn't, sometimes he fucks up really, and then like the game devolves around there. But if you're going to play the game the way IG does, like you do require a lot from your jungler. So,
anyway, sorry, what was the point you were going to make before about how they've basically like we're almost going to like have to wipe the chalkboard on half the shit we set up before.
Yeah. I think like the way that IG plays out the fucking game is just they have to be fundamentally inconsistent, right? Because they're always playing every lane as if it's strong side, as if they're creating up an opportunity to for their jungler. Like, so this looks really like crazy when they pull it off, because have an idea that you don't exactly know where Ning is. I mean, he's probably around top lane, but whatever.
Sure.
You don't really understand where Ning is because like everyone's playing that their jungler is there. So if he doesn't leash, they can get these kinds of advantages off of it. But at the same time, it means that if their jungler moves first, like enemy jungler always has an opportunity to get a better trade, right? Because they can always gank bottom. They can always gank whatever lane. And then if Ning isn't there, then they get something out of it. And if Ning doesn't get more out of the other side, wherever he is, then basically IG is fucked then. So they're really 50-50. The other thing, though, is I think that IG use, like, because they're constantly pushing, like, every lane, the way that they use teleport is, like, so G2 obviously is the team that's probably getting credit for flexing the most. I would say that IG is the team that is, like, fucking up everything by making everyone run teleport, especially in LPL.
Yep.
Especially in LPL, because it's like they'll just teleport to any fight anywhere and win, and then like they don't lose that many creeps because they're always pushed out. So
yeah, you have three. This is a team that has 3 lanes constantly pushing, whereas like the proper analysis that Kelsey's alluding to is you're gonna have proper wave management on the team where top lane's making their bounce, maybe bot lane is choosing to push and crash at the turret and constantly push because jungler's playing mid to bot or something like that. And IG is just like, fuck you, we're just going to push all lanes. Where's our jungler? You can't figure it out. Because if it's like the former, how I mentioned it, you can kind of have an idea of where the jungler is going to be. Because, for example, if I'm top laner, and I have 2 waves at my turret because the enemy just crashed it, my jungler doesn't want to be topside because now they're very easy to invade, or else I'm going to lose 2 waves if I respond to the enemy invade in topside. And IG just throws this all out the window, and likewise with the TPs, it's like, yeah, if you're going to go and fuck with our top laner while we're all pushing, we're all just going to go and join you, and now you're at a numbers disadvantage and you're fucked. Because you're now overcommitting. And we're going to get 2 or 3 kills on the Shy, who you've asked about the Shy. Mechanically, it's slightly disturbing to watch play. And when I say disturbing, I mean he is very, very, very mechanically apt. I don't know.
That's why I always say, and unfortunately, obviously, this analogy has been so broken, it's worthless to even say it, but I've never used it, which is why when I say it, I think that's relevance. To me, he is the only player I've seen in that regard, especially for a top laner, that was comparable to Faker.
Yes.
It's like the level of this shit, because I always make this point, I always use that classic quote that says something like, a great... You know, I think it was based originally on archery, where they say like a great archer can hit a shot no one else can hit, and a genius can hit a shot no one else knows exists. That's the difference, you know.
What it comes down to is understanding your matchup and understanding the gameplay loops that will always consistently occur in your matchup. So
I'll give you a great champion to watch this on, right? And it's not one people would think. I'm not going to pick Irelia or something where, you know, it's a big... The one to watch for the Shy is fucking Vladimir. Yes. Watch the engages he does in these team fights. Like, he goes for the engage where my brain, and I've seen quite a few Vladimir players, goes too low health now, wrong move to do. And it's like, he knows that's exactly the moment to go in and you will win the fight.
Yes. And I mean, just besides like team fighting aspect in the 1v1 and where the reference with Faker comes from, and Faker is someone that also did this, and he was like, when he first came about in the league scene, he sort of revolutionized things with how people were approaching laning. He understands how to take a momentary losing trade to open up a window because of cooldowns that were spent to make that trade, to make a much more severe winning trade for him in the next 5 to 10 seconds, to the extent that he might just solo kill you off of it because you've made a mistake. And
which isn't a small feat, obviously, for anyone thinking. Like, just imagine yourself playing the game. Everyone, even a lot of pros, are in the moment of the game. They're not... like, this is like this guy has a superpower where he's seeing what happens 10 seconds later if he does something.
And it's that, and he understands conditioning. So it's, when I mean conditioning, I mean not the mastery in the game, but he's going to do this consistently. Like, he's going to punch you up. He's going to punch you in the right cheek multiple times, and then when you finally block, he's like, nah, I already know you're going to block it, and goes for the
analogy for that, by the way, is another concept punch. That is a sports concept that might help people understand. if you ever watch, one of my favourite sports is basketball. And actually one of the reasons it's one of my favourite sports is because it's a sport that you can play one-on-one in, basically, even in a pro game. And what you do essentially when you are a great one-on-one player is you actually cannot only have one strength, because if you have one strength, everyone defends that one strength and the coaches tell them how to defend it, and you will actually be way less effective. The greatest players, literally, this is what's crazy, the absolute greatest like one-on-one players in basketball typically developed their like unbeatable move or whatever initially as a weakness, because what would happen is they would have to like set that up by doing the other thing enough, right? That was the only option, was to do a counter, to do something else, right? So what you have to actually have to be the best is like 3 or 4 go-to moves. And the idea is, one of them, if you're playing a bad play, you just do that all the time. That would be the OP move, you know. But if someone correctly defends that, you are setting the person up so you can do your third go-to move when they then do the proper counter to the first. And if you can get that concept, top lane especially is so much about that.
Yes, and it also comes down to, so now they're like, so if I do this, you're going to do that, and if I try to do this instead, you're going to do this. And the Chi understands conditioning so well that I think it just stresses a lot of players out, because it's like, how do I get an opening on this player in this skill matchup that, or even in this matchup that I should be winning? Because I've seen him do it in matchups that he should lose. And it just comes down to, he's making people flip coins, and he's like, and he's probably, what I would guess at least, is he's really good at looking at animation cues and having a good understanding of positioning in the lane comparative to what options the player has. And because of that, he just fucking reads people like a book. And it's like he's playing a fighting game in a way, honestly. Honestly, I think of top lane in 1v1 isolation almost like a fighting game a lot of the times when it comes to this, and in fun matchups. When it's tank versus tank, not so much.
I'll even say, by the way, I'm not someone who's like an expert about fighting games, but one thing I know that works in this analogy is exactly that. That's the reason why there's that famous, like, sadly it's a cliche in sports to say it, but like players like that, that's why people always say it. It's like time is slower for them. It's not really. It's that they can sort of see ahead and do something at the same time, but it will look like that, because when you slow it down, you're like, even when I slow it down, I can barely see what he's doing. Like, how did he see that window? What is he doing there? But they've just unfortunately got to a level we're not at. We are mere mortals compared to them.
That's not it, actually. What it is, and I'll tell you, is they've played it 100, 200, 300 times, and they know ahead of time, like, they're going into the lane matchup, they know at this point in time, at this level with this item versus that level with that item, at this point in lane, I can do this. And when he does that, I will do this then. It's like a math formula, and he knows it ahead of time. And so he's just got it ingrained in his head that he understands it now. And this is actually something that when I'm working with younger players, it's something that I am teaching them, because it's not something that even younger top laners, they understand it to a degree. It's just getting it ingrained in them and making it an instinct almost.
Well, actually, maybe this would be an interesting way to kind of wrap the episode up and make an interesting point about the way the pro game is set up. Because one of the interesting discussions, I found it really cool that this came up this year, especially because of the rise of the likes of the Chi Caps to like true global superstardom. You'll notice people keep circling around a topic that I know Veteran especially has pushed a lot, which is the idea of like letting players test their limits as a player in order to see if you can sort of become the Neo in the Matrix, basically. And the problem is, this is one of the areas I personally think that Korea is actually, they're not just behind, they don't have the concept. Is in Korea, their entire way of coaching people was the opposite. Their way of coaching was like, never do these things because they're risky and they involve, like, you have to, like, basically, I always say like this, it's not even just risk. Some of these moves have no risk if you perfectly execute them, but that can be like walking a tightrope. And so to them, in their own mad way, this is a mad conclusion to come to, in their own mad way, Korea's ended up as superior North America because they just go, nah, just revert to what seems safer and what I could plot out now and know all the variables of. But obviously, if you do that and you play someone who has this aspect to their game and they've taken it to the nth degree, you might be in trouble. Like you might have a very hard time matching up against those people.
I think it's so like there's understanding. So I guess the one kind of thing I'd add to what we're talking about with the Chi, it's like there's understanding it and having played it multiple times, but also like being able to actually execute it every time, which like you can have a lot of it. I think a lot of players will have a lot of experience and can identify certain windows and certain timings, and they know that if they do this, then this will happen, then they can do this after that. But I mean, no one is going to have the level of execution or the consistency of execution as someone like the Chi, and that's probably something that he's grinded like very well.
I mean, the mechanical aspect clearly helps as well, right? Because obviously the joke was it wouldn't even matter even if you could conceptualize what Faker did. Like I always tell people this: if you want to see a good example of what a truly godlike mechanical player is like, watch Faker either on stream or in Pro View. Because what's mental is when he does these outrageous outplays, like he is really, really fast to click, but he's almost never misclicking. There's no spam. Like he's not a guy who's doing like that fucking shit like double if he's doing like input like buffering or whatever. He just presses at exactly the right time, and to him he looks calm when he does it, dude. It's insane when you watch him stream. Like he just does this insane outplay, and he's just calmly pressing all the buttons at just the right time. Like there's no panic whatsoever. He's never accidentally doing the shit he does.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's weird because it's like. But to bring it back to the point about testing limits is that you can only, I think, get to that level of execution by being willing to try to do it over and over again, right?
Yes,
and
that's why I'm suggesting, if the coach tries to beat it out of you early, that player will never become that player.
Yes, and I think part of it is also where we put execution on such a high level when it comes to these players, and we're like, oh, these guys are so godlike, it's untouchable. And I revert back to fighting games, which I have some knowledge of and experience of, and I'm a big fan of. But you can look at Counter-Strike on your case. League of Legends on like the grand scale of things is like kind of dead center in esports when it comes to mechanical difficulty, where it's not a difficult game. It really is not like that difficult of a game mechanically to play. There's at max, you got your mouse, you got a couple buttons on your keyboard. Not that many, not the whole keyboard. 5, 6 max. The game's not that hard. It's difficult, but it's difficult because there's so many interdependent factors going on at the same time. You're not just thinking about how you're trading. You're thinking about your wave. You're thinking about last hitting. You're thinking about cooldown management. You're thinking about where's the jungler at during all this. You're thinking about what's the next objective. So when you're,
it's the reason why even in NA, someone like Piglet can't just be on the best team all the time. Like it doesn't matter how good his mechanics are. Like that strength alone won't allow you to be the best player.
No, it's I like to revert to like a sports game when it comes to this, not the gameplay itself, but like you going and making a team or whatever, and you see a player stat and like 98 on mechanics. I don't think when you have a player 95 on the mechanics versus 98, that 3-point difference is going to make a difference why one team wins over the other. It's going to be all the other things, how the map's being played, how things are being communicated, how the mental and the emotions on the team are being handled. These things are honestly more telling and more important to the game than the raw mechanics. People overhype mechanics. And we overhype it because, number one, it's fun. Number two,
looks fucking sick.
It's flashy as fuck. I mean, exactly. We get to meme about blue juice and animation canceling and talk about leader and all that. Exactly. And I'm a big fan of leader myself. But at the end of the day, it's not what League of Legends is all about. There's so much more in the game. And those things, everything else, is what's going to win games. Mechanics is just what's going to... Number one, it's the bar that allows you to play at that level. And number two, it's what is going to give you the edge. And number three, it's what's going to defy things that were believed, because you might be playing a rough end of a skill matchup where you could describe it as like a 45-55 skill matchup. But because you understand these particular openings and you understand just the right timing and you're not a coward and you're willing to go for it, that you change that outcome. And because you change the outcome and now you got that lead and now you can actually push your lane to do things that the enemy team wasn't prepared for you to do, you change a game because of it.
I'll give you the reference. I'll use a sports analogy. So a great example, because everyone will know this player, is Michael Jordan, right? Well, because he was so insanely skilled, every highlight video is going to be like, fucking... Like, go under the basket and dunk on the other side, like do some ridiculous shot that shouldn't be with the guy's hand in his face. But what they don't understand is the reason he could do all that and then make the highlight video is because he had the best footwork in basketball at the time. So his ability to position his opponent, to put himself in the right position, to get to where he wants to take a shot, to hit the normal shot, which then means the guy has to defend the shot, which means you can go past, which then allows you to do the dunk that you looked amazing. Listen, I can tell you, right? This is not an exaggeration. There are actually way more players than you would think who could do the flashy play. Believe it or not, there are players who could do the crazy dunk, but they don't have any of the things I just described. So in a pro game, they would never get to do it, or they'd do it so rarely, they'd never win, Like, they would have to basically have like a massive mistake by the opponent to do that. Whereas the difference is, in this scenario, it's because he did everything else at a high level that then... When he was at the level, by the way, of the other peers of his who were the best, then he could add that bit on top and be like, now I am unbeatable, Yeah. This video was kindly supported by Patrick Ribeiro, Penguin Off 9, Dean Tanglis, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, Fat Guy got 24 ADR in an online qualifier, Lee Chaolan, Blunt Smoking Anus Destroyer, JDubs, Chi Mao, Tobias Bernasconi, NateDOhDoubleG, Alexander Rao, Kolja G, and as always, special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Now, do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for some of my content? Obviously, I have quite a varied output. Do you want to ask me a question for my monthly video AMA? Maybe you want teasers, see who the guests are on my next shows. Do you want to take part in a donator discussion with me about esports? Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Scrilluminati today. In the description box below, there's a Patreon link.